Yep. I knew that's why you did that. What's up, man? What's up, Cloud? The plan is we're chatting for a bit, and then I'm going to tune us into the Hippy Dippy Championship. Should be some pretty contentious shit. Hopefully we'll learn some things. Oh, and also, there's a Margot. There she is. There she is. This title is clickbait. That's what it is. Big girl. What, do I not look like a shameless e-girl to you? Come on now. I feel like it's pretty much the only way to even attempt to compete in the just chatting section of Twitch nowadays. Unless you're already established. Can you... Yeah, she's currently rubbing her face on my monitor. She being dumb. Hey. Okay. Hold on one sec. Going. Yeah. Most of the time she loves this shit. Okay, well, there you go. That was that. Yes. Oh, this. Oh. Oh, this is gonna be good. This guy's a fucking loony. Oh, I'm pumped. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely gonna tune into this debate and listen to some dog shit takes on some pretty important issues. So, Katsune and Cloud, how have your days been? Oh, and Vosh is online. Shall be beginning shortly. What's dude? How you doing, man? Good to hear. What you been up to today? All right. You working tomorrow? Hmm. And then you'll have a day off, is that right? Trying to see if I remember your schedule. A whole 7 hours. Hell yeah. I might do a few hours of work tomorrow. 2 days off. Hell yeah. Because I admittedly didn't. I did just a hair shy of what I normally do yesterday and today. So I may just compensate with a few hours like tomorrow morning. Sunday, Monday. Hell yeah. Good for you, brother. Got any plans for your days off? See, I like to be reasonable. Hurry your piece of shit ass up, Vosh. God damn. You know what? Actually, before we get started with this, no shit, that guy dips. That doesn't surprise me. Holy shit. Wait, hold on. Oh yeah, we got a few minutes. I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick, but plan for my days off. Have to call my doctor's office again. Oh, that's not a fun day off event. I want something fun. I'll be right back. Real quick, just go and pee before this debate gets started. Okay. Oh, and Vosh just got a fresh fucking cut, man. The hell?
Dippy Championship belt. This is a fatal four-way, so it's no tag team action. You might be thinking, Rob Noor and John Burke, return of the Mega Powers? No, there are no teammates in this. So although John Burke might normally agree with me as a conservative, I'm going to make him look like Bon Jerk. He might be able to handle me if we had something like a push-up contest, though I doubt. But when it comes to the realm of debate and intellectualism,
This guy's a fucking
he's gonna be
weirdo.
back in the and we'll find out that the populist python Rob Knorr is the real cream of the conservative crop when it comes to online debating. Next competitor will be Demon Mama. I've always been told if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So to Demon Mama, I say this. Lastly, we have Vosh. Vosh, the defending Hippy Dippy champion.
That's
also
actually a good
known
one.
as the Money Man. He talks about socialism, talks about communism, just like so many leftists on Twitch politics. Oh, they're great moral people when it comes to spending other people's money. But it comes right down to it. They're concerned about the money and the bottom line, just like the Money Man Vosh. He's going to be wishing he never entered the world of competition and meritocracy. It's not some socialist utopia that he's looking for where everyone gets a medal. No, this time, the Money Man's going down. And lastly, I say this, the chairman of the Hippy Dippy podcast, and I do use the word chairman because he reminds me of Mao, Dylan Burns. If you get in my way, you're going to be like everyone else that gets in the way of this intellectual juggernaut. Looking at me from the bottom cellar, saying, why did I ever try to get in the way of someone who's so intelligent, someone who's so articulate, the cream of the conservative crop, the populist python, Rob Knorr. Why did I get in their way? So it doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter who the judges are. Come April 9th, 2021, 8 p.m. Eastern, Hippy Dippy Podcast, I'm going to be walking out of there with the Hippy Dippy Championship belt. Oh, and by the way, everyone, have a good one.
Yo, sick intro, dude.
Now I know all you logic lads and lasses out there don't much appreciate the power of an anecdote. So I've got some mathematics for you, all right? Let me lay it out for you. You know, they say that all debaters are created equal. But you
Who says
look at
that?
me, and you look at Vosh, and you all know that that statement ain't true. You go 1v1 against a normal debater, and you got a 50-50 chance of winning.
No,
But
you
I'm not a normal
what?
debater. I ain't even a human. I'm a certified rhetorical freak of nature. I'm a demon, baby. You got a 25% chance at best to beat me. Then you add Rob Knorr and John Burke to the mix, your chances of winning go straight through the floor. See, the fatal four-way at Hippy Dippy, you got a 33.3% chance of winning. But I've got a 66.6% chance of winning because Rob Knorr's already been beat by me once and he ain't even going to try. And we both know that John Burke has more beef with Rob than he does with either me or Vosh. So we can just rule him out from the get-go. So Vosh, you take your 33.3% minus my 25% chance, and you just got a measly little 8.3 repeating chance
Whoa,
of winning at
whoa,
Hippy Dippy.
whoa. What the fuck do you mean watching Jordan Peterson wreck a woman in an interview?
6 repeating, and I've
Also,
got a
dude.
141.6 repeating chance of winning at Hippy Dippy. Vosh, the numbers don't lie, and they're adding up to a disaster for you at Hippy Dippy. But guess what?
You either come over here or you shut your fucking mouth.
For all of you, at least. Anybody can become an imp. We welcome everyone in the pits of hell. And on Twitch, no one knows how you're going to vote. So you don't got to worry about the haters being mean to you because you like Demon Mama. And I know you love Demon Mama. So you should vote for the real queen of debate, me. And join the rest of the imps in hell as I become the Hippy Dippy champion.
Place your bets, place your bets. If anyone knows anything about any of these people, place your bets. If you don't know anything about any of these people, place your bets. Because why the fuck not?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the
Vosh
Hippy Dippy
looking fresh with a
Championship.
new
This is the
haircut.
fatal four-way between Demon Mama, Vosh, John Burke, and Rob Knorr. They're going to be going head-to-head to decide who will be walking out. Will it be Demon Mama, a new champion, John or Rob, or will it be Vosh as he tries to retain the belt as we go through 3 topics tonight on a contentious debate?
Questioned all of her
Last week's
opinions.
Rumble was one to remember.
You're gonna have to
This
link
one,
me to that
we
video.
won for millennia. Let's go. Welcome the guests as we explain the rules and talk the format.
I'm usually not a huge fan of questioning other people's opinions I'll
Hello, can
question
you all
the
hear me?
underlying facts that helped formulate those
Welcome.
opinions, but
Okay. Is everybody
attacking
having a
someone's
wonderful day
opinion
today on
is
this Friday
sort of
afternoon?
just like, oh,
Always.
my opinion's
Doing great.
better.
Happy to hear it. So, let me lay down some of the ground rules and see
Go
how
ahead
this
and
is gonna work.
establish that.
So, nothing TOS. I think we all kind of understand that rule.
Because you're going to have to
I
dig
gotta say
into
this
the
after last
damn
week's show
facts that
especially,
underlie
no
it
slurs,
to make
will
the
be used on
determination.
platform. Don't need to go through another hypocrite situation.
Generally
Thank you very
speaking.
much. Okay.
Haven't watched it till the end
Plan
yet,
out the
though.
window.
Yeah, I mean,
And,
yeah,
not
that's
playing
fair.
out the window. I'm sorry, Vosh. You can't use any of them tactically this time.
I think
So
Jordan
no
Peterson says
slurs,
some
and we're gonna do
dangerously
our best to
conservative
address
shit.
people in a respectful manner. So I'm not saying that you have to be respectful, but when addressing people, we either use their names or their pronouns. Does anybody have any objections to any of these rules? Okay. Everything else on limits allowed.
Not to say he's not a smart person. I mean,
Now,
generally
there's one last thing I
speaking,
need to
he's
say
he's
when it
a
comes to
smart
rules.
individual.
If I start talking, everybody else
You
gets
shouldn't
quiet,
like
'cause
someone
my
just
job
because they're
here
a good
is merely
talker.
to regulate.
Just
So if somebody
you know,
hasn't
just
had a
throwing
chance to
that
talk,
out
I wanna
there.
make sure that they get a chance to talk and I moderate. I'm
He
not
is
coming in here so
indeed
I can
well
throw
spoken.
a elbow up the top rope. I'm just here
But I have
to moderate.
encountered
Now, I'm
many,
gonna have
many
you all
people
introduce
who
yourselves
are
quickly,
well
and we're
spoken
gonna go into the
who
first
say
topic,
some
and
of
we're
the
gonna get carried
dumbest
away.
shit I've ever
So,
heard.
I'm gonna start on the left with
May I
Demon
ask
Rob.
a question real quick?
Sure.
What's the judging criteria? Is it just
Oh,
audience voting?
that's gonna be.
or-
We're gonna explain that last.
Okay.
Demon Mama, you can introduce yourself quickly.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Demon Mama. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I am sometimes known as the Demon of Twitch Debate. I am a political edutainer on YouTube and Twitch. I talk about all kinds of issues, talk about trans issues. I am trans. And I also like to talk about a lot of lefty issues. So if you like any of that, you can check out my website and come hang out with the imps. There are more imps than there's ever been. And I am so ready for tonight. So thank you for having me,
that
Dylan.
part's
I'm
fair.
very happy to get into the meat of this discussion.
Happy to have you on. Next,
I mean,
we're gonna go to Rob Nor.
I can appreciate
My
not
name's
being
Rob
swayed by
Nor. I'm a
emotions when you're
conservative populist. I've
discussing
lived in
something
rural
that
Pennsylvania my whole
is
life.
more about
My channel is Rob Nor, all one
you
word,
know, questions involving
lowercase, on
fundamental
Twitch,
truths and,
Normal
and
America with
facts
Rob
and things
Nor
like
on
that.
YouTube, and I'm also on some other platforms, but those platforms I don't really do anything live, or I don't really do anything on because I've only been doing live streams lately. I think that I will come out on top tonight as the best debater on Twitch. We shall see. But I do know this: I certainly cut the best promo for this event, so I already got that little title under my belt. So happy to be here and glad to see everyone. Glad everyone's doing good. So.
Okay. Next is gonna go over to John Burke.
Hey, what's going on, guys? John Burke here. I do a lot of politics on Twitch. Thank you, Dylan, for having me on tonight and all the times you come on my, debates. I greatly appreciate it. Looking forward to having some insightful discussions tonight to pick people's brains that I possibly might not agree with, have my mind open to possibly have my opinions change on some things. I don't know. But ultimately, it's looking forward to it.
Okay. And last is going to be the current reigning champion, who's had a reign for about 2 months. Bosh.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm a Bloodborne streamer. Last night, I was the first person to ever defeat Orphan of Cause, and then the Moon Spirit, whatever the fuck her name was. And I don't do debates, so really, I'm just a wild card here, you know?
Okay. Now, lastly, let me explain how the judging is going to work. Now, since this is a fatal four-way, 3 judges is not enough. Usually you have 3 judges to break any tie, but
Yeah.
we could see one judge going for John
again,
Burke, one
so
judge going
part
for
of the-
Vosh, one
Part of my word of caution is, you know, again, just because someone has a vast vocabulary doesn't mean what they're saying is good in whatever sense you want to define that. So yeah, I can understand being a well-versed orator, but you know, there are some things he's discussed that I generally agree with, and there are other things that I sort of don't, that are more implicit in his expression and how he conveys certain things. For the record, I haven't watched a whole bunch of Jordan Peterson content just because I sort of got the point, and I'm not particularly enamored by smooth talking and a vast vocabulary, mainly because people have told me that I am good at talking and that I use big words all the time. So that shit doesn't particularly impress me. The substance more impresses me, and that goes back to what I originally said. But yeah, you know, as long as you have the ability to parse through the things he says and make distinctions between what is actually fact and what he sometimes conveys as fact, then, you know, go for it.
They're actually quite expensive to have custom made. You can, of course, support the channel. So we're going to go into the first topic, which is actually very recent news. It's about the Amazon's workers union. The workers voted 2-1 to not form a union in Alabama. Now, a lot of people are proposing a lot of different reasons as to why this happened. And this has also spurred on a different conversation about unionization efforts in the country. So I propose a question to all of you. Why do you think the workers voted not to have a union at this Amazon facility? And what do you think this means for unionization efforts across the country? And also you can have a wider conversation about just specifically what you think of unions as well. Everybody's going to have a small intro period, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. Vosh, you wanted to ask a question quick?
Oh, no, I just wanted to know whether it was free for all or we had rounds, but you just said, so we're good.
Wonderful. So all of you, you're going to have a 1 minute period. Please be short with the intros. Trust me, you'll have time to talk. I'm going to start it in the top right-hand corner with Rob Noor.
Okay, so yeah, I was unaware of this until this and the third topic I was unaware of until like 10 minutes before we came on here. So with this issue, I'm not exactly pro or anti-union. I think that unions make sense in certain areas. They certainly made sense in a lot of places historically, but there are reasons for particular places of work and for particular industries where unions don't work out as well. The question is, why did these people vote not to have a union? Well, there's two possibilities, I guess. One, because they did their research, which was fair, and they determined that a union wasn't worth it there. And I got some evidence to suggest that that could be the case. Or it could be because Amazon unfairly put their finger on the scale and convinced people not to have a union. Either way, like, I don't know. We'll get into the details of what could have happened. I don't see proof one way or the other. It's probably a combination of the two. Do we need more unions? Not necessarily. I am in favor, though, of workers. I think that this country, through corruption in our governorship, has taken away the value of workers in the last 50 years. And so if unions were a way to do that, that'd be fine. But you also see corruption in unions as well. So to me, the question's more about ending the corruption in our government to encourage workers getting the wages they deserve. But I'm not necessarily anti-union or pro-union. Yeah, that's basically my thoughts.
Fair enough.
Next, I'm going to send it over to
yeah,
John
I
Burke.
think that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Rob just hit it all. I think in the early days of like the 20th century, I mean, even beyond that, unions were definitely needed. You saw the working conditions of, say, for example, women in sweatshops.
I listened to like 6 hours at least. I think it. Oh man, it might have even been. No, I think it was like 6 hours of discussion debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. And while it was an entertaining debate, I think they were both just arguing their own opinions at the heart of it, which didn't change my views at all on the matter of science versus religion, which is, actually, it's not even so much science versus religion per se. It's more, you know, does some supreme being exist? But anyways,
I would say look into the issues behind why they're unionizing.
Just think for yourself and question
good, poor,
everything you hear, even the good sounding
in regards
shit.
to workers' rights regarding the labor union. But yeah, I don't feel very passionate about this, and it's not that I feel like it's not important. I don't really know a lot about it. So,
okay. Next is going to be Demon Mama.
I find it interesting that the populace so far don't really support unions. Unions are about the best way for the populace to band together and stand up against people who have an incredible amount more resources against them.
That's not what
In
they
this
said,
case,
for the record.
There's a lot going on in here. In fact, as it turns out, the National Labor Review Board might actually be ordering this election totally off the books and a second election to be held, because there was
Pretty sure the
so
acronym
much
is
Amazon tampering
National
in the,
Labor Relations
democratic
Board
elements of this election that it can't that there's a very good chance that this election will be redone. Not only has there now been evidence revealed that Amazon was working with the USPS to provide to get an illegally placed ballot box placed on their campus under, of course.
Just out of curiosity, can you give me some positions of his that you tend to agree with?
Them to stop making mandatory propaganda meetings every single week that pumped out anti-union propaganda. Now, I've worked a lot of jobs in my life. I've worked a lot of minimum wage jobs. None of them have ever been able to have a union, but every single one required as a part of their training for you to watch anti-union propaganda. So if you want to know why unions have declined in America, as has the satisfaction of work, America's wages, and the benefits for America's workers, it's specifically because there's been a mass effort of anti-union propaganda pushed out by every single major corporation in the United States. So that's why union
Yeah,
efforts
that's all right.
fail.
You don't have to
Not
give me
just because
exact
of some
words.
democratic element. In fact, I
Just
just
give me the
watched
point.
video footage this morning that in the Amazon Alabama warehouse, they were putting placards in the stalls that were anti-union propaganda. So you can't even pee in peace.
Okay.
That's all I got to say on this one.
Next is going to be the current champion, Bosch.
Yeah, I respect the results of democratic elections, but that doesn't mean that those results can't be criticized, especially when there are serious inquiries into the legitimacy of that election and the extent to which other agencies influence the results. People ultimately believe what they're led to believe. And if you are a modern American worker, you are insulated at all times with the message that unions are going to be harmful to you and harmful to the economy and harmful to the business. But of course, the data contradicts this in the extreme. Unions are far and away an incredibly effective way of ensuring the ability for workers to collectively bargain, which allows them to fight for their rights, allows them to fight for higher wages, and for a great many other things. So what we're looking at right now, and of course the dust needs to settle a bit with this particular Alabama warehouse. What we're looking at right now is the consequence, I feel, of a fairly successful decades-long campaign to stigmatize unions in the mind of the American worker. We've seen union membership drop proportionally to the percentage of total American wealth that goes to the ultra-wealthy. It's a campaign they've been waging for hundreds of years, and they're doing quite well at the moment. So while I respect democratic results, barring the results of this investigation, because it seems like Amazon had their foot on the scale, had 2 feet on the scale. While I accept democratic results, we should still wonder, why do workers so consistently vote against their own best interests? Why? What are they taught? From where are they being taught? And why are they being taught that?
Top down, bruh.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you all politely, this won't be enforced of course, to be on your best behavior. Always be nice, make sugar your favorite spice, and you may all begin the first round.
Yeah.
So I do think it's funny that Vaj hedges right out of the gate by saying he respects the results of elections, because it sounds like what Demon Mama's saying there sounds so similar to what people that question the results of the 2020 election were saying. And Vaj even alludes to it when he talks about people putting their thumbs on the scale. We could talk about the Intel agency putting their thumb on the scale of the 2020 election, other things like that, government institutions that were putting their thumb on the scale. I understand that's off topic, so we won't focus on it. But the point is this, like, I don't understand if it's Amazon's company, barring that they did anything illegal, even if they, were heavily telling their people not to unionize, why that's not their right to do so. Also, I think that it's naive to think that these people don't have access to the internet and tons of arguments and tons of informations that are pro-union places. So to just assume the naivety of the people that voted for this and say they only made this decision through propaganda, I think that that's tenuous at best.
This is silly on a number of levels. First and foremost, the reason why we scoff at the election meddling claims with regards to the national election is because Trump's campaign team consistently embarrassed themselves dozens of times over every time they were asked to prove it.
Can you define the patriarchy as he presented it?
Correct and compelling. Additionally, the idea that people aren't influenced by propaganda, what you're essentially saying is, how can people be influenced by propaganda when they have an internet connection? If that was the case, the entire field of advertising wouldn't exist. I think that's a ridiculous concern.
Nor would Rob's channel either.
Oh, true. Yeah, exactly. Wait, how could I supply any info to my audience? We all have access to an internet connection. No, people get info from where they get info, and not everyone spends hours typing up research on union relationship to proportion of wages earned by workers.
Yep.
Ultimately,
that's one of those sort of ground level questions.
Now, they wouldn't be putting
how does he define it? How do you define it?
A pretty good return.
How do I define it?
Well, and it's not just a matter of just propaganda either. We're talking about, I'm not kidding you, you can get video footage of the Amazon of the Amazon influence. By the way, and this is a matter of FOIA, which is currently being fully investigated, and there's been, I think, 3 very serious journalists who've signed off on this so far. One of them from Vice, one of them from The Intercept, and then a third from a admittedly biased union source who was making the original allegations and are now being investigated. But in these videos, you can literally see where Amazon had the voting or the ballot box placed underneath their security cameras. So it's not just a matter of propaganda. We're talking about active and constant pressure from the employers. This is what we call intimidation. And in fact, there has been multiple reports from the employees at that site saying that their managers were heckling them constantly to make sure that they voted and with a very strong nudge in the direction which they were supposed to vote. This is a very dirty situation that goes so far and by the way, this was a story that broke before. This has already been verified, but Amazon pressured the local town to remove a stoplight outside of their facility because the union organizers were handing out pamphlets at that stoplight while cars were stopped. And they literally pressured the town, threatened to close up shop and deprive the town of any tax revenue in order to stop union organizers from getting pamphlets out. To me,
so if we accept that definition, which I'm not disputing you at the moment because I don't know, do you think that's not happening on most, if not all fronts?
But that's terror. That's how this stuff works. That's how you impress on one another.
All right. So just to respond to what Vaj said there. So again, he says that's because Trump's team was laughed out. Like, I'm not talking about the claims that vote tallies were switched or Dominion did this or that. Whatever. I've never really been on board with those arguments. But we could clearly see that there were agencies within the government that put their thumb on the scale, such as the intel
Tons
agencies.
of tits.
In fact, we had 50 intel officials that supported the censorship of a story critical of Biden and his son.
I got to put up a dono goal for the portable hot tub.
Sure, I would love to go down that road. We don't have to in this debate, but I would love to go down that road. The point is that it was clear that the intel agencies, places like the EPA, places like the IRS, places like the Defense Department or the State Department, were all putting their thumb on the scale. I give you a chance to talk.
You're literally just spewing lies right now. That's ridiculous.
When you're done, you have every chance to respond when I'm done. So the point is, in addition to that, we also see major corporations, Amazon being one of them, that put their thumb on the scale to advocate for the Democratic Party. And
I know.
In fact, we see a near monopoly of the control of information online. And
seems that stuff doesn't get as much attention though, because it really is more based on the art of the thing.
It's good to get
and once you start actually building up the level of paint and the detail, the real detail that every person, mostly dudes and kids are looking for, is no longer really discernible, and that's not as entertaining and not as fun to watch.
Rap God Rob over here just fucking
whereas you got all these
fuckload of claims about the EPA,
fucking
the CIA,
bikini
the
babes
FBI,
and
everybody,
loose
the
shirt
aliens, everybody's in
babes
on the conspiracy
just
to make Biden,
dominating the just
win,
chatting
right?
section.
With no fucking evidence, not a single drop of evidence. I just find that really, really ridiculous. And it's not a serious part of this conversation because we have evidence. And you don't have
additionally,
anything. You're just making
it's
claims.
important to point out that the reason why these claims are kept so deliberately vague is because Trump supporters always have this general idea that the entirety of the media is out to get them.
I get what you're saying.
Every institution except for Trump, which is funny because Trump's campaign was actively using his power as the president to influence election results long before the actual votes started being counted.
There's a difference
Trump
between using the body as a canvas for art and using the body as art.
Up to the point where the RNC was actually held at the White House, using the power of the presidency as a campaign tool for his upcoming term. So again, like this vagueness doesn't fly here. If you could find evidence of like a sustained propaganda disinfo campaign from the Democratic Party, that would go, but you can't because they didn't do it.
Sure. Like for example, I give you off the top of my head, we had an inspector general that found 17 times the FBI lied or had omissions in order to spy on Trump's campaign illegally. They did so using paid opposition Russian research from Hillary Clinton that used as the central person responsible for that, a known Russian spy that they covered up for. That IG also said that an FBI lawyer actually changed the results of an email that asked whether or not Carter Page, a campaign associate of Trump, that they used the two-hop role that Bill Binney talks about to spy on Trump's
You're
campaign.
still talking
whether
about
or not,
Hillary Clinton.
Then why were no charges
I mean,
filed?
you asked for specific.
Wait, then why were no charges filed? Because people always say this.
He was
they're
charged.
Like, the Democratic Party did it. Okay,
No, he
charged. So
was.
with a conviction?
Yeah, they gave him a slap on the wrist, but yes, he was convicted.
Okay.
This lawyer. Okay.
what?
And
What?
secondly, he was
Wait, what's
convicted
the
of
name of this
falsifying
lawyer?
evidence. The lawyer was, let me look it up. I used to have his name memorized, but
Yeah, I can't remember what was the count of the the post-election cases. Was it like 60 cases that Trump
Yeah, it was
lost
like
with
60
no
or
evidence?
so.
And
I
now-
don't think
and
Trump
now-
filed
and
those
now
cases,
yeah.
but,
Here,
and
see,
now the primary
that's where the left
representative,
falls
who, by
apart.
the way, I remember
Still using the
because I've
same
been in
fucking
this
words,
scene fucking
no
debating
evidence.
you people for a long time. I know that you
Stupid
all were
ass.
clapping for Sidney Powell back in the day when Sidney
I
Powell
wasn't.
is now saying that Sidney Powell is now standing up here going, "Oh,
It
it
was
was
a
just joking. It was just
a
a
meme.
joke."
hey, anyways, Kevin
Release
Kleinsmith
the
was the name of the lawyer.
Kraken!
Kevin
Yeah.
Kleinsmith was the name of the lawyer that was charged and pled guilty to falsifying documents.
How dare
In addition
you.
to that, the inspector general said the most shocking thing that he saw was that the actual Russian subsource that made up all of these claims, when the FBI finally, after getting the warrant to the FISA
You know what
warrant
I think
twice,
is
when they
hilarious
finally talked to the
is-
primary subsource, the primary
Especially in terms of Twitch, right? These chicks can wear bikinis, but if they were to wear actual lingerie underwear, which covers the same amount of shit, they'd get banned. Go ahead and explain that one to me.
We were
I
talking
gotta
about
ask a
Amazon.
question real quick. I gotta ask a real quick.
Sure, go for it.
I'm sitting here. I'm listening to all of y'all talk because again, I'm not very well versed on the whole unionization thing. The only experiences that I have though is when I saw at the hands of the VA that were federal protected employees that essentially were protected from being fired from the hospital because they, as I just stated, and the quality of work was
This
so
dude has
subpar,
resting
there were
mad
literally
face.
veterans laying on the floors.
He
being
seems
looked
pretty
over because
chill,
according to
but
one
he
actual
looks
secretary
real
I spoke with,
angry.
she was only required to make 25 appointments a day, and after that, she could literally still get paid, sit at the desk, and do virtually nothing. That's what she was required to do. And they couldn't touch her. They couldn't fire her. Now, I'm not saying unions are inherently bad or inherently good, but my question is, how do you curb that lack of, I want to say, ambition, care for their work? Because it did exist. I've been there many times, and that's a sincere problem. And the other thing that I wanted to point out, though, is Vash's point as far as propaganda. And I'm not saying propaganda doesn't work. I think both sides employ this. I mean, my God, all of the 2020, 2016, there's propaganda left and right. The MSM, I can't sit there and say I'm a Trump supporter. I'm not a Trump hater. I'm a constitutionalist. I take it case by case. But I think the generalizations that I've seen almost everyone in this room make so far, I think it's kind of like, it's not really fair because I like Trump over Biden. There are things I don't agree with Trump on, but to be painted as like this one person that's all or
So even if we take your 60-40, which is just your approximation based on your experience, I imagine, which I'm not trying to discount at all. I'm just saying, even if we accept that number is true, that would mean that men are dominating women on most fronts. Now, it wouldn't mean they're dominating them on all fronts, but on most fronts, it's happening, which means Peterson's argument that the patriarchy doesn't exist is bullshit. And you might not call that an issue, but I'd be willing to bet a whole lot of women would call that an issue. Now, I agree with you in terms of if the natural structure of a given business industry is naturally more dominated by men and others women, even for any number of reasons, whether it be just pure interest or brute strength or otherwise, there's a difference between the natural and organic differential between the power that men and women have when you look into the more grainy, nitty-gritty stuff. But when you get to the broad brush, it is undeniable that the patriarchy exists in regards to the fact that men are generally regarded as superior when it comes to economics and other things included. I mean, the fact that we had to, there had to be a women's suffrage movement for women to have the right to vote. That's just, that's evidence in and of itself. The fact that there's a pay gap on the same job from men to women, it is just further evidence. This goes over and over and over again. Women are talked over in conversations and debates way more than men are. The list goes on and on and on. So, Peterson's argument, if I had to guess, is more this like semantical, ideological, sort of nitpicky position, which is it's just not reality. Anyone can sit here and just look at the world and go, yeah, no, men generally do have it better. And you can argue against that by saying, well, yeah, but men have a higher suicide rate. That's of their own doing because they have maintained control over women and in a sense, forced themselves to be stronger and work harder all the time such that their mental health fucking sucks. Maybe it's because women are more in tune with their mental and emotional well-being than men are because men are so focused on capitalism and being geniuses all the time. Just something to think about. So that's why I ask for the position. Jordan Peterson's position that the patriarchy doesn't exist is just fucking stupid when you look at the actual world. Yeah. And I'm not trying to shit on you. This is why I will always caution people when they say, oh, he sounds good, or like he uses big words. And that can be beneficial for sure, because it's better to be a good speaker and be able to say things in a way that people, feel like they're going to understand. But if you really dig into it, some of his positions, that one being one of them, are just fucking dumb. And I think if you have the ability to think for yourself and question and dig past that stuff and parse through what he's saying, that's okay. What I take issue with is the fact that he knows he's got audience members who don't analyze what he's saying. They just take it as gospel, right? He has his own sort of cult of personality in a sense. And a lot of intellectuals do. And it's sort of inherent that that's going to happen. But, you got to not use that sort of authoritative position that these people are in as some justification for the idea that they're right all the time. They're not. They're just humans on this world the same way we are. Anyways,
right now, I share
the show is better
people
than
on the
prostitution.
Left, discomfort with what I see as too much corporate control in this
It's
country.
expose women to safer in home in their room and make
is correct in every situation. I'm not
and
opposed
stop
to
paying
unions,
tax.
despite what Dina Mama said.
Oh man,
I'm
you're
saying that there
fun,
could be specific
KK. I like
situations.
you.
I'm for giving people the choice to vote for a union or not.
It is
I understand
unconstitutional.
That there will be
damn it!
from the people that
Let
own
the
companies to
ladies
not want a union. And I
fly.
understand
You
that
know what I
propaganda
mean?
can have a serious influence, and if they broke the law, there's something that should be looked into. We'll see if that happens. But having said that, there are good reasons to reject unions, and I could get to some anecdotal stories around.
By the way, Doomed, I enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. I really do. So if you ever want to dig into more positions,
that I have about that mainly
feel
is
free to
that
let
there
me
are
know.
unionized we
could even have a Discord call sometime if you wanted to.
That are making
I love talking about shit
$22
like that,
an hour.
especially.
And additionally, one of the big concerns with Amazon workers is not just their wages, it's their rights. Amazon workers tend to get treated pretty poorly. They're cut to the line on incredibly narrow margins with very, very high quotas. They're held to extremely high standards of performance. And if they fail, if they can't keep it up, then they just get dropped. So a union could go a long way towards helping them with that. And we know Amazon has the money to kick towards these workers. It's really just a matter of, do we believe that unions will do what we know they will do? And I think a lot of the workers in Alabama probably don't. I think a lot of people have forgotten how much unions were responsible for the high standards of...
Well, no, I'm sorry. I just want to ask you a question.
Here, let me say this.
I'm generally curious.
Let me say this. Don't compare yourself smarts-wise, because part of how you learn is by listening to and talking to and discussing things with people who are not just smarter than you, but dumber than you. And I'm not trying to say either way, because I don't know you well enough to make some definitive and arrogant statement that I'm smarter than you. I mean, technically I might be, but that, you know, that just means we got shit to talk about. You know, we don't have the same knowledge base, and that's a good thing. That's the beauty of humanity and life, is we can share positions. And, you know, you may be able to pull me over to your side on certain things, and I might be able to pull you over to my side on certain things. But you don't know if you don't have that discussion. And I feel like a lot of people are intimidated when others sound smart. And like, I'm not trying to dunk on anybody, you know, unless it really just needs to be done, which is extremely rare. You don't seem like one of those people. So I think we could have a discussion. You know, don't worry about whether you are smart enough. We can just talk, you know.
Industry. In addition, one of
the things I really want to do on my channel is just talk to people.
For Amazon is that they are constantly surveilled. Most of what
especially
they have to do,
about important
they literally have
issues.
to carry a phone around with them and press every time they complete a job. This is notoriously bad. This is what's led to stuff like the infamous pee bottles and poop bags, which is because they're monitored so tightly that they literally cannot stop to do anything else, or else their pay will be docked, or they will have a flag go up where they will be hassled by a manager. It's really, really
That's where
bad.
the poo snot came from.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. You're right onto it. And like so this is a huge problem. Also, to make a small fact correction to what Rob was saying, the initial union push brought in 3,000 people who were willing to sign up to organize with the union. That's a lot of people. That's more than the amount of final votes that they got in the end. Now, the initial union push came before 3 weeks of Amazon propaganda, which, by the way, Amazon was ordered by the government to stop doing because it was so ridiculous. They were having 1 to 2 meetings of anti-union propaganda that were mandatory. They were making their employees come into work early to go to these meetings, or else you lose your job. Yeah, that's pretty bad. The government already had to intervene here. So they were not just, again, they weren't just putting their hand on the scales. We're talking about just a massive, massive intrusion on workers' rights.
Yeah,
and as
so
it turns out, in a lot of places in
here's the thing. I don't think unions should be mandatory because I think if the economy was working in an optimal manner, unions wouldn't be necessary. The problem is, and this gets more to your point, I imagine, because of how our economy has functioned and structured itself over, most specifically the last 100 years, unions are becoming necessary. I mean, to a much, much larger extent than they probably thought they would be at their inception. So I completely... I disagree and agree at the same time, you know, like I get what you're saying. And yeah, I think, you know, the whole point of a union is to level the playing field with the workers' bargaining power. So at least at its fundamental core, I completely agree with its existence.
Living is lower.
The problem with this Amazon situation is, even though unionizing is probably a fucking great idea, Amazon has too much power at this point. Because guess what? If these people are all going to band together and form a union, they're going to get fired before the union is formed. And then Amazon's just going to hire a bunch of other fucking people because so many people need jobs right now. Like they have the American worker and arguably workers across the world by the balls. Like, I mean, this is part of the problem when you allow a corporation or any company to become too large, is what the fuck are you going to do? So the only way we're going to make any real change here is by legislation. And it's not necessarily to say we break up the big tech companies and Amazon and, you know, these big, just gigantic organizations, but there needs to be some structural change and regulation here. I don't think individual people trying to unionize against or to advocate for their best interests with respect to a company as large as Amazon is going to go anywhere. You know, it's like David and Goliath.
Actually argue for their wages. God, I remember when I was a kid,
also,
my parents said,
no one's smart forever or permanent. Yep. Degrading over time. No shit. Yep. Exactly. Everyone has their own best. Yep. And at whatever pace you're learning and improving as a human, as long as you're learning and improving as a human, that's great. Now, some people should definitely be learning faster than they are because they're not putting in any effort at all. But as long as you're moving in the right direction, you're moving in the right direction. Paid less than men in official. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I mean, women are paid less in a lot of different realms. This is part of why I have a hard time shitting on the fact that on a platform like this, for example, that is allowing what's happening when it comes to like the just chatting streams, women are destroying, right? Like they're not actually doing anywhere near the same level of work, and because they're attractive, they're making filthy amounts of money. Now, in light of all of the past discrimination against women, do I really have any room to bitch about that? Not really. It'd be nice if so many women were willing to pay me because I'm fucking beautiful, because I am. But just is what it is, you know? That's where we are now.
Like
No,
that.
listen,
Most Americans
but
don't live like
just-
that. You're just
again,
pulling on an anecdote from your own life.
Bosch,
That's
thank
not
you
how
for
most
not
Americans
interrupting.
live.
Like, we could have a discussion. Thank you for not interrupting every 3 seconds.
Oh, I'm
Bosch. I
very
really
sorry.
appreciate
This
that.
advice is
Yep,
too high
completely
for you.
agree.
So,
I'm
anyway,
just
so
Googling.
Give a second. Give a
That
second.
goes to what I was just saying about Amazon. Amazon will just fire all these people. Like, let's not delude ourselves. All of these people, if Amazon actually thought that a union was going to be formed, would be fired. That's it.
sorry, just
Okay,
you
John.
let
Berg.
John go before me. He's talked least, so that's cool.
Okay, John. Were you talking before? Okay.
Yeah, I was
So-
gonna let them keep going.
Okay, John, you go first. Then we'll go to Rob. Then Demon Mama. Sound good? There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Just to go back up to what Vosh was saying, you talk about negotiating salaries for employees and things such as that. I'm a small business owner myself. When somebody applies for a job, to empower employees to essentially negotiate their salaries, or to empower them to the ability to do that, I don't think that's just like we set that there and that's just going to be they have that option. I think naturally they probably would do that. Who wouldn't want to try and negotiate for a higher salary? Well, who dictates the level of salary? Well, the business owner does, essentially, right? I would assume that. Like, they have the negotiations based upon, like, what do we feel is a good compromise in regards to what you should be paid. And I know that local economics take a major play into that as far as pay based upon where you live, but I think the biggest contributing factor is your set of skills, whether they be entry level or you be experienced. What kind of education do you have that actually supports the job that you're going to do and what you bring to the table? So as a business owner myself, I don't pay my employees minimum wage. I actually invest in them. But I invest in them because I think a lot of people don't seem to realize that if you lose an employee, I put a lot of money into training that employee. If I lose that employee, number one, I'm taking a hit financially. I'm going to take a hit in my business because I can't afford that. But number two, it doesn't sit well with me to have the employees essentially leverage
shit.
something over the business owner's head, saying that if we
You're
don't
gonna
get what
sleep
we
2
want,
hours ago. What the
then
hell? Go to
essentially
sleep, man.
what,
It was good talking to you,
unionize? And
though.
I support that.
I
think that's, in a
appreciate
sense,
you
that's also
actually
part of free
getting
market
into
right there.
a
So I
subject
think, I kind of see what y'all are
that
saying.
is
I agree in
important
some
to talk
states,
about
I agree.
and
In some cases, I
actually
don't.
matters
But it
as
does-
opposed to
it's
like
very
just
concerning
small
to have
talk
this
all the
idea
time.
that,
I think it's
employees should be
great.
empowered
And
to
if you
leverage
want to
things against the
stimulate my
business,
mind and
or the
maybe I'll
business owner,
stimulate
rather. Now, you said
yours,
corporation, so maybe that's what you're referring to.
say the
instead.
word,
So I'm just
man.
trying to be clear
I
on
love
one.
that
We're talking
shit.
about small
So
business, we're
with
talking about
that
large-scale
said,
corporation business.
so it's just the problem to me.
shut these people up. I'm trying to say some stuff. With that said, thanks for hanging out. I hope you sleep really well, and we'll see you next time.
I mean, they can't write your checks for you, but
Also,
I think that
KK,
it's
thank
fair
you for
them
being
to at
nice
least
and
have an
saying
input.
goodnight.
So when it comes to small
Naturally, yeah.
businesses, I think the best kind of union.
No, I
isn't
was talking
like a
about the
workplace
patriarchy
union,
thing.
but it's God, I'm forgetting.
That was
the
just
term.
like a
It's when you
tiny little
unionize
example,
everyone
but it
of
matters.
a specific.
I think if we
field in a
deny the
given
fact that the
area. So-
patriarchy exists,
yeah,
we
so like a
only
city
help
will have
it,
like this is the
persist.
grocers union, you know, or city
Yeah.
will have
Yeah.
this is the X, the Y union, sectional union.
It's time to level the playing
for
field
whole
between men and
sector.
women.
Now, if it's true that you pay your workers more than minimum, I'm sure you
Accepting
do. And it seems
the
like that you
natural
take
flow
good
of
care your
things.
workers, and they joined a sectoral union. In all likelihood, the beefs those unions would cultivate wouldn't be with you. They'd be with the shitty business owners who do everything they can to skinflint the people who work for them. And I
could
and
you
I think
guarantee
that's a
that,
good
though?
system too.
And because but could you guarantee that though? That's the thing
not
that
possible.
concerns me though.
It's not possible to guarantee that, but I can guarantee that a lack of unions has led to a lot of workers getting exploited and a significant decrease in the average wages of the American middle class. So I can't guarantee there won't ever be issues with
Let me ask
solution
you,
A, but I know there are
does
big
this
ones
look
with solution
better?
B, and we've seen 50 years ago what the
Did we
system
do
used to
this
look like
or go
with
back the other way?
widespread unionization, and it seems like it was fairer. And it's not like people were getting thrown out of business back then either. The business owners were doing well too. It's just a matter of how well do you distribute those funds? How amicably do you? But I think that in the case of a sectoral union, I imagine you would be almost unaffected. It would be about the less fortunate people who work at small businesses similar to yours who maybe aren't getting such a fair deal on their wages.
Well, then let's take, for example, a startup business. I'm sorry, I mean, I really enjoy this. So say like Rob wants to start a grossing business, say, for example, he wants to start his own little grocery store. And
Good
they
one,
created that
man.
type of union previously discussed. And he said, well, all I can afford to pay
Good
my
night,
employees
dude.
right now is the
Thank you
minimum
for the
wage.
laugh.
Anything
We'll
above
see you
that,
next
I'm not gonna be
time.
able to
Fuck,
expand. I
don't
don't
make
have the
me
startup
laugh
capital
like
to support
that.
That union comes in, they say this is what you have to do. Therefore, what is Rob left to do?
And if I go ahead. I'm
Oi,
sorry.
No, sure. No, well,
20 people is too many to debate at the same
So
time.
Posh, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. Let me be quite clear, and I think John agrees with me. No one here, I think, saying unions are a bad idea. We're saying that they shouldn't be forced. I think. Hopefully we all agree with that. So they shouldn't be forced, but certainly you should have the option. And again, if Amazon did something illegal, we will see. I'm assuming it's going to be investigated. They should be punished if they did something illegal. I have no qualms with that. I have no love for Amazon. Don't get me wrong. And I certainly think that corporations are exploiting workers.
This guy
so I
has
don't
no
have a
love for
problem.
Amazon.
My
Bullshit.
point is, though, that
Everyone
unions
has some
aren't
love
always a
for
panacea.
Amazon.
So
2-day
in this
shipping is the
circumstance
shit.
with the hypothetical, I could tell you that in the town of Clarion, there was where I kind of have lived around my whole life. There was a company that my father worked for that made windows, and they decided to unionize. And
Whoops.
at first, the union actually did a lot of good things, not really with wages, like you're saying.
So
Bosh,
you're
but
from
with
India, is what I'm getting
paid
out of
leave
this.
time, working conditions, and things like that.
Very
The
cool if
problem
that's the
was
case.
The union bosses that came in started to not really represent the will of the people that worked there, and so they started pushing for a bunch of stuff that the people were like, eh. So what ended up happening was they pushed for increased wages by about $4 per hour, and basically the company ownership sat down with these union bosses for like a month, and when there wasn't much budge on it, they came into work on Tuesday
sound
and said,
menage.
the company's
Yes.
shutting down Thursday, pack your stuff up. So my dad worked there for about 16, 17 years. There were people that had worked there for 30 plus years, and it was just like, now I understand what you're saying. Well, that's one crappy company or it's just one situation. I get that. I don't think that impugns all unions. I'm just saying that there are particular places where it could be more beneficial than others. And the other thing I'll say is it's not a panacea like you're saying, Bosh. Even if it would be a good idea to unionize, there's so many things that have occurred over the past 50 years that aren't just the decline in unions that have led to workers being screwed over in this country, such as free trade deals and the outsourcing of labor to China.
No doubt.
There's a possibility, and
You are
there's many more
correct
we
on
could
that
talk about,
one.
but I don't want to go on all day. And this one's very important because what could happen is if enough people unionize for Amazon in the United States, Amazon could just be like, well, okay, we'll take our business elsewhere. We'll go to a place where we
In
can pay
some
people
senses,
less.
I think
And
that's
so now you're in
probably a good
difficult
thing,
position
but
because of all
in
these
other
outside
senses, that's
things like,
definitely a bad
free
thing.
trade deals that have shipped labor overseas, bringing in like cheap workforce in the form of immigration and things like that. Now the bargaining power of labor is decreased. And so now someone in Bessemer, Alabama has to think, look, the union sounds like a good idea, but I'm making a job that's double the normal rate of people that live in this area. And all in all, things are okay. So I don't know if I want to risk it given what I've seen all over the place.
Yeah, that's
and
a
was it
huge
Amazon,
problem.
am I wrong that was going to put a
You got to be able to
There's this
moderate.
famous story about AOC complaining about her
Because you
district.
can't
Wasn't that
expect
Amazon?
everybody
And
to be
Amazon just
civil
packed
with
up and was like,
everybody
"Fine, we
all the
won't come to
time."
your district." So those things
Naturally,
happen. And I'm
I
not
mean.
saying that means Amazon's a good company. Or
Again,
that's a
it would be
reason to
nice
reject
if that were
unions.
the case, but it
this
is
something
not.
that's in the mind of someone as they're voting whether or not to accept.
I want to make
right?
sure that Demon Mama does get to talk here because they were.
I want to respond to one last thing, and then
you
I'll
respond, then Demon Mama.
Right, then I'll keep my hands off. So there's a lot there. So broadly, one of the problems we have with small businesses today and with unions today is that so much wealth has been siphoned off into gigantic mega corporations that it's really difficult to engage in the production of startup businesses because the capital isn't there, rents are extremely high, and people don't want to pay reasonable prices for commodities that you could sell at a mom and pop shop. Everyone wants to go to Walmart and get it for 2/3 that price because it was made with plastic injectors over in China by basically slaves and then shipped on over here through the Suez Canal. So the problem that we have is that the fact that unions can hurt small businesses is a product of a lot of downstream economic consequences that we're facing, not just as a product of globalization, but also business practices that defer to these megacorps. So one of the issues is technically outsourcing should be good for everyone in this country. It means there's more money in this country. If you're outsourcing, that means that you're engaging in I forget the term, but when you're specializing, they do this thing better or cheaper, we benefit from it, we take the wealth. That should make everyone wealthier because the systems that we've set up in this country should allow that wealth to be distributed, but they haven't been. More money gets stored in offshore Cayman Island accounts, which means the average worker doesn't have as much money to spend. Comparative advantage. Thank you, Chet. That's what it's called, comparative advantage. The average worker doesn't have as much money to spend, which means that they're more likely to be forced into buying from the megacorps and not from small businesses, which also leads to a ton of other problems, like every neighborhood looking the same because all the mom and pops close and everyone just goes to the local Target. And there are a lot of problems here. I mean, maybe you call it corporatism. I think this is an inevitable consequence of capitalism because this is benefiting the people with capital, the people with power. But if we both agree that's a bad thing, I think that unions are a part of the solution to that problem because workers that demand things.
I completely agree. So this is one of the things that I really want to teach people when they come into my stream and we talk about anything at all that could be conceived as contentious, where people disagree on issues. I feel like, and I just had this conversation over the weekend, I feel like most people by default approach any disagreement with the goal to make the other person understand their position first and foremost. I think first and foremost, you should try to understand other people's positions, like the person you're talking to. If they have a different opinion than you or a different position, you should try to understand how they arrived at that opinion or position first. And then you should have a discussion where you try to come to an understanding between one another. So many conversations are had before you understand each other, and I think that's just ridiculous. So if we started from a position of trying to understand each other first without trying to sway, then we could reduce conflict and turn the discussion into something productive and of higher quality. And I think you would have a lot less dunking on people. I feel like people would be more open to listening. I feel like much more progress would be made if it wasn't just this fucking sports game where it's about, getting the dunks on people and making your slam pieces. It's just like, I mean, here's the thing. It's entertaining to watch. It's a part of why we see so much of it. But it's not actually making anywhere near as much social progress or improvement than we could be making. That's really frustrating. Also, what happened here? Social progress, indeed. What the hell happened?
It's very easy for 5 employees to say, we're not coming to work unless you pay us more. It's companies specifically like Walmart, Amazon, Best Buy, whatever else you want to think of, that we need unions there. And we don't. And because of propaganda, because of constant anti-union thought, because of constant union busting and deregulation, we don't have those unions, which means we have a massive workforce of exploited delivery people all over America, which is allowing Amazon to kill every other business type, by the way. For those of you who don't know, Jeff Bezos has been very explicit about what his goal with Amazon was. His goal with Amazon was to get it bankrolled by investments so that they could run the company at a loss for as long as possible and put out every other competitor out of business. And then they can jack their prices up. That's what Amazon is doing. Amazon wants Amazon to be the only place you can buy anything in America. And guess what? If that ever happens and there's no unions, America is going to become an Amazon dystopia overnight. And I bet that we'd only see a few months until we started seeing Amazon company towns and Amazon bucks being paid for wages. And that's not the type of future that I'd like.
Okay,
know?
but just to be clear here, right? Like, I don't think that the unionization, if Amazon's that nefarious, and I'm not disagreeing that they are, I don't think that unionizing would be a correct fix-all that would solve all this. And I think, look, let's be clear. I think all four of us are talking that unions could be good and that they definitely should be allowed to have the option to unionize. That could exist either in a socialist or a capitalist system. I think we're all agreeing to that. So to me, the more nuance is, one, do we have proof that it was through subterfuge or through some sort of nefarious means that
Yes.
these people chose? I don't think that proof exists. I think we'll see what
Well,
the
we
results
already
of an investigation
you mentioned
said.
earlier that there was like no, there already is evidence. This is the thing. Now we can't say that the entire thing, that the entire vote,
which is exactly my point.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can't throw it out entirely, but the fact it is a fact that Amazon has already been in trouble in this specific incident
Okay,
for
so
taking
any-
illegal actions. They've already
so-
had to be censured by the state. They are
All right,
cutting every
again,
throat that they can.
Okay, so again, we don't have proof. We'll see what the results of a lawsuit are, and we'll see.
We
what
have
it
proof
says.
of that first one, yes.
No, we don't have proof. We have evidence, but we don't have proof that that was what tilted the vote to
the
go
government,
the way it did.
the
That's what I'm
government
saying.
did have to step
so
in.
anyways,
so.
so just going on from there. So I think that the actual more interesting conversation, because there's a lot of agreement here, is one, what system's more responsible for this type of thing, sort of like more left-wing politicians or right-wing politicians, and secondly, are like, would we, and I'm just going to throw this out there based on a conversation we had the other day, Demon Mama, and I'll just ask this real quick to everyone: would you force unions? Like
What do you mean
through
by
like
force?
through government force? Do you think every company should have a union through government force?
No.
Okay,
No.
I just want.
I mean, I don't even know how that would work. Like I
Well,
think
right.
I think that
Well, we
should
talked about
definitely
the other
ramp
day
up-
about
I'd
wanting
say
a
probably the
system
same
where
way
the
around
workers-
like insurance.
Oh, we
Right.
talked
They
about
want it.
like in an ideal world working towards like co-ops. I think that would be great, but that's a much longer term goal than what
Okay,
we're talking about
fine.
here.
Then
Right
we
now,
don't
we're
have to
just
put-
talking about how to save the American worker from
Okay.
just the absolute atrocious conditions that they're in right now.
Okay,
because
so
they
I
are.
agree that the American workers in terrible conditions. I don't think that that the main focus needs to be unions, though certainly that could be part of the solution. However, like, I think you could see things, and I think it's particularly by giving the government more power, which has encouraged lobbying, which has allowed companies like Amazon, because you say lack of regulations, the exact opposite's actually true. Because we give the government the power to intervene in these businesses, it allows people to lobby. It allows Amazon to lobby the government and then get laws that are favorable. The best
No,
example
no,
I
no,
could
hold
give
on a
is
second. No, that's not true,
why do you
though.
constantly interrupt? Please let me
No,
finish
because
my point. Then
you
have the
make
opportunity
wait,
to
hold on
speak.
a second. I want to
You
explain
say
this,
things all the
because you
time
will
I
make like
disagree
50
with, and
claims.
you say things all the time I disagree with, and I don't
wait.
interrupt.
Okay. Rob, can you spend 25 seconds finishing your
Yeah,
thing, and then we'll
the
go
best-
for 30 seconds for Dear Mama. There we go.
Yeah, the best example I could give is the stimulus bills that we saw posted that actually were a huge boon to Amazon and Walmart. It was one of the biggest transfers of wealth from small businesses and workers to large corporations that this country's ever seen, and
It's a
that
good
was
question.
interventionist left-wing policies. Even the Republicans signed on; they deserve fault for this as well. Trillions of dollars that's going to cause inflation and went
It's an
primarily to
independent
corporate
agency
America
of the
off
United
back of
States
small
federal
businesses and
government.
working class America.
There you go.
Okay. Dear Mama, and then I'm going to ask a question for the room, because since nobody represents the position, I'm going to see if people can engage.
It was
with it.
created following the stock market
Sure.
crash in the
So,
1930s.
God, there's a lot of
I
claims
think
there.
they mean
the first
like
off, that I would contest is that the idea that we don't have evidence
1929.
that unions would be a good answer.
Yeah.
Actually, we do. We have not only history, but we
The
also have
primary
data on our
purpose of
side.
the SEC
Unions
is to
were
enforce the law
responsible for a
against market
massive,
manipulation.
Massive,
The
revolutionary
real question is
change
whether
in
they
American work
actually
conditions
do
around the
that.
turn of the century. And also, we've seen that unionized workplaces have safer work conditions, better pay, and higher job satisfaction. The only reason that people fight against unions is because corporations make the most money out of it. Now, I also disagree very strongly with this idea that it's government intervention that made lobbying happen. No, it wasn't. It was Citizens United that allowed corporations to give endlessly to super PACs, that has allowed for corporate lobbying to get out of control in this country. Corporate lobbying is out of control, and that's a result of deregulation. That's a result of the government saying, nah, actually, we're not going to really look into this anymore. So yeah, that's just factually false. And it really frustrates me too. Also, Trump's stimulus plan, which transferred a lot of money to, a lot of corporations, also, if I remember correctly, I believe we went over this data in the last conversation that we had on this. Actually, if I remember correctly, still gave something like 60% of it to smaller businesses. So I do agree that there was a lot of problems with the way that Trump approached it. He gave out a lot of handouts to a lot of friends and allies, political allies and whatnot, through his stimulus package. But I just think that that's a problem of Trump and the Republican Party being horribly incompetent and greedy.
Okay, quickly, I wanted to ask a question. So since nobody, Vosh, is it quick?
I had one quick thing to say, very quick. This is a bit of a side argument there, but it just occurred to me that if you had stronger unions, you could rely on those unions to protect workers and wouldn't have to rely so much on government intervention. One of the reasons why the government seems to keep meddling in the affairs of corporations and their workers is because there isn't really an alternative.
No,
But
hold
if
on. I got to
unions
disagree with you
were-
there, Vosh. I'm sorry to cut you off, but wouldn't you just be replacing one overlord for another?
Well, I would rather, if I had anybody advocating for the rights of workers, I would rather it be the workers themselves than a bunch of Washington bureaucrats. I mean, the unions
But
aren't
union
overlords,
leads-
they're
Yeah,
bargaining.
yeah, I'll give you that.
I mean, union
That's
leads are
why he
voted
puts
on by the
himself
people who
Well,
are
in
no,
the-
no, I,
in the
I,
middle.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but I feel like the human
These are
conditions being
leftists
ignored here
and
in
these are
regards to, like,
right
absolute power and,
wingers,
by the people for the
left
people. I get
wingers
what
and
you're
right
saying there,
wingers.
like, who
I
better
don't
to
know if you
represent-
call them
but the same thing could be
rightists,
said about electing
but,
a
yeah,
congressman.
these are
representing
leftists
Washington,
and
whatever
these
the
are
case may
right
be, that comes
wingers.
from your district.
So that's
or
like what
somebody
he's trying to
from
do
your
there. But
workforces, which I
I
imagine you're
agree
applying
with
We're
the
to.
fact
talking
that
about the needs of a
there
worker
could be some
in
better
a given workplace.
identification
I would
Yeah.
much rather
of
have a
Yeah.
person who
the
works
participants
there, who's been
and the
elected as the head
moderator.
of a union, managing and resolving the disputes between workers and the corporation, than like
Right.
government lawmakers who do these massive and wide swaths with essentially no larger oversight. Sometimes they know what they're talking about, sometimes they don't. I think it'd be better for everybody, frankly, if these discussions were kept more local, more intimate, and more direct between the workers and the corporations than like
Right.
every couple of years we have some bombshell revelation where the government does X or Y, you know?
But you see, but I agree with you there. I agree with you in that point because that's why you also like I'm more state versus federal. And that is, but the point that I'm trying to make though is, if there was a union to form wherever I'm at, where I'm working, yeah, I would definitely want the representative to come from me, from the foot soldier, if you will, the factory worker. But the human
World
condition
War
still
Z?
exists
Yes,
in
I
regards
did.
to as they elevate. So if,
was a
if I'm
fun
an elected
movie.
union representative, am I still a worker, or is that my full-time job now? That's all I do is that, or do I remain a foot soldier?
Depends on the union. I mean, if it's a big enough union, it'll be a full-time job, but for a smaller corporation, it could be. I mean, your argument against like overlords ruling over people is the reason why we need some check for corporations. You get it from Washington or from the workers who you hire, but it has to come from somewhere.
Okay,
That's all I'll say.
I'll be the bad guy quick since nobody wants to be the bad guy. So suppose like all these, you're doing everything to help these small businesses, but if these larger corporations can give people like cheaper products, better pay, and health benefits comparative to these smaller mom and pop shops,
Wait, what's the wise idea?
why should the state be stepping in, or anyone stepping in, to help these small mom and pop shops when the workers are getting better conditions and better help from bigger corporations? Why would anybody who cares about workers jump at the bit to help these small mom and pop shops when
Yeah.
I can get a better job at Walmart?
I can
You should
explain
be-
it super easy.
yeah.
Yeah, if you'd
I
like,
mean, conceivably, sure.
Why would you light a fire in your house to keep you warm in the winter when you could just set off an explosion instead? The short term is fantastic for corporations like this.
Right.
They can send out all kinds of cheap products all over the place, but they can't last. We know that their plan in the long run, they've been very open about this, is to essentially be able to raise prices back to what they were. Those benefits will disappear. They are gaming the system using massive amounts of venture capital, massive amounts of Wall Street investments in order to essentially screw over an entire country in the name of their own personal profit. And if
remember I said earlier, making it a team sport is like the most fun shit to watch. Notice how there are no centrists or moderates, as they would refer to. I'm one of those people. But the problem is centrists and moderates are, I mean, generally just, and I like, I'm saying this with respect to myself too, less entertaining, because we're focused more on the reason of any individual issue, as opposed to taking a side and then aligning all of your views with that side, which is what many people do. Not all, but many people do. I am an issue-based thinker, not a pick a sides thinker. And the problem is, generally speaking, that's not as fun.
Show a store owned by, I don't know, Joe Dirt.
We're already seeing that.
But the
We're already
thing
seeing
is,
that.
you
We've
know,
already
there
seen
are
that
some
happen. In
things
fact,
that I can
Amazon
agree
prices
with
have gone up. I don't have
when
the
it comes
study
to
on
both
hand,
left-wing
but
and
it's very easy to
right-wing
locate if you want to look
perspectives,
into
which
it,
is
how much
part of
Amazon
why
prices have actually
I'm a
changed,
centrist moderate.
over time. In addition, if we're going to expand this out from just Amazon into talking about stuff like Walmart, well, Walmart has a tendency to create food deserts completely unintentionally because they will put their
Well,
Walmarts in
that's
locations
not
that are
necessarily
not
true,
to
though.
serve any
I mean,
need.
think of binary, right? I mean, there's a lot of utility, and I know, like, you know, binary is not technically a real nature thing per se, but some things it's really simple. They're very two-sided and uncomplicated, and that's great. And sometimes there can be you know, a really clear right answer between two things personally. You know, for example, is it more right in a general colloquial sense to kill people for some justifiable reason? And I know we're not digging into definitions here, but or is it better to kill people for no justifiable reason? That's pretty binary, right? That seems like there's a pretty clear answer there.
Say, well, we need to import a bunch of people. We need to, you know, shut down things. Have you know, and they ended up resulting.
But I
in
get your
companies
point,
like
for the
Walmart and
record.
stuff doing awesome, while small businesses did poor. To answer Demon Mama's claim that the stimulus went to small businesses, the net effect of the policies that we saw over the past year, and this is under Trump as well. Don't get me wrong. In fact, the bulk of it was under Trump. The net effect of those policies was to greatly enhance the wealth of companies like Amazon and Walmart, the very companies that you're suggesting that we shouldn't do. Many of those policies were endorsed by people on the left, whether it be the lockdowns, the stimuluses, etc. So another thing that you could see is like minimum wage laws. Like I say this all the time. We have a mom and pop grocery store in my town.
Simplifying things means you have to think less, which means you have to work less. That's why people make everything so black and white, even the shit that is obviously not black and white. That's the problem. And more people need to understand that that is a problem. That's generally not a good thing. Right? We can't simplify every issue into something that, you know, a fourth grader can understand. Some things you just need to be smarter or more experienced and more wise to actually engage in the discussion. Like if you haven't reached some sort of threshold competence to discuss any specific issue, then you should just shut the fuck up. You shouldn't be able to take a simplified position on the shit and then think you're a genius. You're not. You just picked a simplified position on it and you won't move because you're an idiot. Yes, hail junk food and junk chatter. Yeah. Oh man, I love me some junk food, I will say that. But I fucking hate junk chatter.
The economy of scale ensures that larger megacorps will always be more economically efficient than mom and pop businesses and therefore will always be able to flex their weight around more. It's only government intervention that's kept this problem from cropping up sooner. Anti-monopoly laws, antitrust laws, the fact that it's illegal to engage in certain forms of pricing out your competitors. What you're describing right now is capitalism. Without the government, this would have happened way, way, way faster. If you want to fix
would those companies have scaled to that level without capitalism?
Well, no, well, capitalism is what allowed them to scale to that. Well, oh, are you saying industry can or cannot thrive with or without it? I think industry can do just fine with collective ownership. But now,
exactly. I like to be well-rounded. I like to be the yin and yang at the same time.
System we live in. The solution to it seems simple enough to me.
I'm glad you enjoyed the cat
people
cam.
who work at big businesses and small businesses alike get the equitable treatment, and then we need to make sure that we can afford tax breaks and other kinds of preferable treatment to smaller corporations. There are benefits to smaller corporations or mom and pop stores. I don't want to walk down Main Street of my town and see nothing but chain restaurants. I want to be able to see the unique and vibrant local culture that I moved to this city for. And as long as megacorps keep swooping up all of the real estate, that ain't going to happen. So we give preferential tax treatment to small businesses to make sure that they can fight on a level playing field. There are plenty of things that we can do, plenty of ways we can legislate to make sure these businesses continue to exist. And hey, if they're a little bit less economically efficient, if it means the government has to spend a little bit of our tax money, I say that's worthwhile, because I would rather have a 0.2% hike in my taxes than live in a country without any local culture, and
Thank
a
you.
country where entrepreneurship is dead, because the only way to start businesses is to be born a trust fund baby and spend the 1.2 million your daddy left you on a new yachting business. You know, I want to preserve those elements of what people, I guess, call the American dream. So I'm okay letting the government be the ones to ensure small businesses can maintain some degree of
Are you calling
So
me
can I
hot?
try and understand what you're saying here, Vosh? Because I think I actually agree with you.
After this interaction, I do think we should move on to the next topic of the night.
Yeah, sure.
And I
So
do
I-
agree.
yeah, I
She
just
gives
wanna-
a very
I want to
chill,
make sure I'm
like
understanding you correctly. So basically,
nighttime,
you're in
relaxed
favor of
vibe.
government interventionism as long as it's not favoring large-scale corporations from coming in and actually forming monopolies, kind of like AT&T did back in the 80s. So you're incentivizing local mom-and-pop businesses to receive tax breaks, favoritism over large-scale corp. Is that what I'm getting from this?
Yeah, essentially. There are
Okay.
significant benefits to small businesses that don't necessarily play out in the GDP, but I think those benefits should still be recognized.
Okay.
Was
Just
there
wanted to
time
make
for
sure I
me
understood them.
Are we gonna do
respond
final
to
thoughts
anything
or?
Rob said, oh yeah, I don't know if
Thank you.
That's what we're doing. We're doing final thoughts now.
I'm good to wrap up if
Yeah. So
yeah,
each
so
people, like, just 1 minute. So we'll start with Demon Mama.
Yeah. So, I contest the idea that on it, like just outright that government intervention is like a bad thing. I don't think that we have any evidence of that. In fact, I would argue that it is a lack of government intervention in the pandemic that led to us having this terrible, like the worst of both world situations, because the government was so hands off. The virus got out of control. We have over 600,000 dead Americans. And we also, because there was no support for small businesses, have the only people remaining are large corporations. I know I've seen this with my own eyes in my own town that I live in. Nearly every local restaurant is out of business now, and the only thing left is McDonald's. That sucks. That is a result of incompetent and incomplete government intervention, not government intervention alone. And I think that's important to distinguish. And also, I will remind everyone that we were talking about unions, which I think that unions are a much, much, much better way of like Vosh said earlier, preventing the government from ever having to get involved. Because if people can self-determine in their business and bargain against their boss, who they produce products and labor for, that solves the problem before it ever even becomes a
It's
problem.
actually an interesting way of looking at it.
Support unions. Unions are really important, and unions have.
I mean,
all
you're
but
right in
disappeared
a
America.
sense.
We need them back, or else
I don't
we're gonna
know
be
that I'm
facing a
more cranky and
Amazon-owned
dangerous at
dystopia.
night. But
So that's
I
my
get your
feelings on this
point.
issue.
You know,
Okay. Next is gonna be Vosh.
best debate is daytime. We're not vampires.
I think I've expressed my
I'll
point
give you
more or
that.
less. There are a lot
We
of
are
people who
indeed
think
not
this is
vampires.
adversarial, but
Hopefully,
unless we're looking out for the literal 0.001%. I mean, unless we're out here boxing for Bezos. I think that there are economic solutions to these problems that benefit basically everyone on the supply chain, domestically, locally, workers, union workers, managers, everyone. I mean, it's not to say managers at these Amazon union warehouse or non-unionized warehouses, it's not like they're always doing great either. I know how tough managerial work can be. It's work. And I know that often you're placed under quotas just as stressful as the people below you by the people above you. And the reason these managers are so hard on the people below them is because they know that if they're not, they'll get booted and replaced with a person who will be harder on them. So I don't think this doesn't need to be an adversarial relationship. There's only one group of people who would really hurt from unions, and those are the people who own those Cayman Island, bank accounts. Aside them, and I think they're doing just fine without us helping them, everyone can benefit with a little bit of wealth redistribution that I think unions could facilitate democratically and fairly.
Rob Noor.
So I think basically everyone's agreeing on the substantive issue of whether or not unions could be successful. The disagreements, the scale of exactly would they be able to solve all these problems. I don't think that's the case, though. I have no problem with people getting out and talking about, like, if Demon Mama and Bosch and even me would talk about collective bargaining and helping certain businesses out. I don't have a problem with that, with educating people that could be better. I do have a problem with any sort of policy or government force of trying to make that occur, which it seems like no one's advocating anyways. When it comes to the issue of what happened under the law, under the government intervention in regard to COVID. No, the government intervention was specifically designed to help these large businesses. Oftentimes, you could see large groups of people at Home Depot, Walmart, other places, but the mom and pop local hardware stores and places were closed down because they couldn't meet the burdensome regulations. We'll talk about COVID at another time, but there's no evidence whatsoever that any of these lockdowns were necessary, were effective at causing any sort of help whatsoever, or that having a larger lockdown would have been something that would have been beneficial. But the point is just this: the
That
government
is
intervening in a
so
lot of the policies we
stupid.
see, particularly coming from the left,
That
actually
is so
harm
dumb.
workers as well.
That is
such as the
absolutely
importing of people,
untrue.
minimum wage laws, which hurt small businesses. But free trade bills like NAFTA and the TPP that were pushed that would have hurt small businesses. All of these things do terrible. And also,
Here's the short answer.
Overseas, like we saw with the
Lockdowns
AOC
absolutely
situation with
do
Amazon, they
work
could outsource
by
work
their
in the
very
city.
inherent
And lastly, I
nature.
just want to say, when it
The
comes
reason
to
they
the
don't
question was,
work
why
is
did these
because of
specific
people like
walk away?
that.
I'm not saying that it couldn't have been untoward
This
pressure from Amazon,
fucking
but if you look at the
boner
average salary
right
and how
here.
much they're making,
Oh, they don't
there
work
is credible
anyway, so we're
evidence
not
that
going to
people have made a
listen.
compelling
Fuck off.
argument that
You're the
there would have been a
reason they
risk
don't
that
work.
possibly that company would have moved. And so they decided, because they were making almost twice as much as what the average person does in that area, they decided that it would be beneficial for them, regardless if you think it's true or not. But they made that decision not because
The
they
one
were
with the
coerced,
flag.
because they actually believe that. Could be possible either way.
John Burke.
Okay, yeah, there was a lot to unpack there. So the first point that was made in regards to there was no government interventionism in regard to the lockdown, which that's actually not true whatsoever. There was massive evidence to show that, whether it be at federal or state level, within month 6, there was over 100,000 small businesses that went bankrupt to the hands of the government in their lockdown. So it makes no sense logistically how Demon Mama can sit there and say that there was no government in it. Yes, there was. There 100% was, and there shouldn't have been a lockdown. I'm totally against that. And you can make the face at your TV and hype your crowd up. That's fine. I haven't done that to you, but if that's how you get your people off, go for it. If you want to sit there and say that there was no government action, then where are those businesses now? Where are those businesses now? That's the problem. So the other point that I want to make in regards to, as far as like the unionization,
You can't
is,
fix
leave it up to the
stupid.
people. Leave it up to the local demographic if they want to have a union. I agree. Vosh makes some solid points. I get, as far as like looking out for the small workers, making sure they get a fair day's wage. I understand that. Also, they're taken care of, not mistreated. So I think, yeah, I like the idea of no government interventionism and allowing the people to vote using democracy or a democratic process to see if they want to establish a union. But I do like the idea of favoring small businesses in the sense to encourage the small or the entrepreneurship mindset to flourish. And Vosh is right on that. There's like certain areas that unless you have a tremendous amount of startup capital, good luck. Good luck. I had to deal with that myself personally. It was very difficult. And yeah, that's. I mean, I'm open to learning a lot about this, but ultimately, I think my feel for is I just don't like a lot of government regulation in the sense of telling me what I can and cannot do, because I think it's in the best interest of myself as a business owner and my employees to see everybody flourish. Like rising tides raises all ships. So, but I think there are counter arguments to go against that. That doesn't make sense in regards to, well, you do have a lot of corporate greed and things such as that. So I don't think it's so simplistic to say yes or no. There's a lot of things to unpack there. So.
Okay. Next, we're going to go into the next topic, which this one is a little bit more broad, so it'll allow for more wiggle room. So if you don't know a ton about one certain area, you'll be able to use this to wiggle around a little bit. Do you think that a cultural shift to the left in the United States would be beneficial for America?
Yes.
Broad, but simple question.
Yeah,
Throw
I'll
it
take
over to Vosh. Since you're champion, you know what? I'll throw it to you first. I'm rigging the game from the start. You started off.
Yeah, I know, a bit of a contentious take. I know nobody expected it from me, a socialist, but yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool, personally. I have a preference towards that. I think a lot of people on the right especially, have a fear that people on the left just want to flip the perceived imbalances in society. Like Black Lives Matter types want to make it so black people have power over white people, and like women are going to hate men, and like so on and so forth. And look, I'll say, especially if you're on Twitter or the internet or whatever, there are a lot of people who may give that impression. But when we look systemically at what is trying to be done and the power systems that are already in place, I think it's a fairly unfounded fear. Maybe it crops up time from time. You know, I'm not a big Robin DiAngelo fan myself, but generally, I feel like we could all do for a little bit of intersectional analysis. What's wrong with our country? Who's being hurt and why? What are the power relations between the people here? Who's affected by what? Who here is affected by what, you know? And what can we do about it? And I think if we take that and we have an honest conversation about it, then we can arrive at a lot of really, really positive outcomes that would benefit literally everybody. I mean, nobody would go home losing anything. So I'll stand for that, yeah.
Okay, next will be Demon Mama.
Yes, we absolutely should have a leftward cultural shift. It would not only be good for our country, it would be good for the entire world. The right simply at this point in time is holding everyone back. Whether you're a centrist, a liberal, or a leftist like me, you're being held back by the far right in this country. The far right that peddles conspiracy theories, that rides constantly on hate, everything from their obsession currently, and this cannot be contested. If you spend just a few minutes looking at the most popular right-wing figures online,
I don't know
they're
about that so
churning
much
out anti-trans
anymore.
content. They're churning out content that cannot be defended against the
But
idea that
yeah,
it's
I mean,
disgustingly racist. It is disgustingly racist. This is a massive problem, and it's
there was
holding us
definitely
all
a
back.
time
It
where
is we can't
the
even
United
have
States
basic
was
discussions about the future of democracy with people who, by
undeniably
and
on
large,
top
literally
and was
call
the
Donald Trump their
example
god emperor.
in
So
many different
if you're out there and you're thinking, well,
respects.
damn, I don't want to be too mean to right wingers.
I don't think
Well,
that's
it's
so
not
much
really
the
right
case
wingers. It's the
anymore.
far right. The far right is like a millstone hanging around the neck of this planet that wants us to go back to some sort of like super Christian, anti-degenerate, world where equality is just gone, and we don't actually have to talk about real issues that matter. And I know that not all right wingers position themselves like that, but a lot of them do. And the most popular voices on the right now are doing that. And I know firsthand. I am a trans woman content creator. I spend my week logging on and seeing that there's 15 new anti-trans videos making fun of my people for being something that they're not. And that's just not acceptable. It's holding back the entire world. We don't even have to touch on economics, although I think we should. But on a social level, we will never have a just world. We will never have a world that can deal with the challenges of things like civil rights and deal with the challenges of things like the environment and climate change and space travel if we can't even get the most basic left-wing reforms in place. We need a left-wing turn. It's required. We won't be able to go to the future with a millstone hanging around our neck.
Okay. Next is going to be John Burke.
Oh man. Okay, I'll stay on topic. So a little bit about me. I used to be a diehard Republican. I used to think in a lot of terms that I would say Demon Mama actually described. There were some things that she said I agree with, a lot of things she said that I didn't. But I think, yeah, there was a lot of conservatives in the GOP, I think from like the Boomer and a lot of the later Gen X that embodied the idea of Christian values being forced legislatively upon the people, and I don't agree with that. In regards to America becoming more progressive, here's how I see it. If you're trans, if you're straight, if you're gay, I don't care. I think you should be afforded the same human rights as every other American. And in regards to people saying things that, well, I'll skip that. I'll get to that later. But yeah, to my overall thing is that live and let live. Everyone should be afforded the same right. I'll even take it a step further. When people, I used to be against gay marriage, and then I actually, I learned a lot. I got around a lot of people.
Thank you.
My mind changed a lot, and I started to understand.
I
And
got
was like,
this
you know
chair
what?
for Christmas.
I don't even think the government should be involved.
It
in
is
marriage. I
ergonomic.
think that's a union between two people that if they wanted
It's
to just get a
comfy.
priest to do your thing. But I know it's a little bit more complicated in that regards to taxes and things such as that. But yeah, I think there are some good things that have spawned from progressivism. I think there's
Yeah, I
a lot
heard
more
that, like,
open-mindedness that is coming, especially from like
you know,
the millennial
these gamer
generation. 'Cause they never
chairs
expected us to do anything worth a damn.
are
We were
terrible
the
for
everybody
your
a trophy
posture.
generation. But I think we've seen a lot of progressive thoughts, and with that though does come the bad. If we want to say that the alt-right exists, well, absolutely they do exist, and there's a lot of people that are that do view Trump as God, King, Emperor Trump. That is very concerning. I don't see a lot of mainstream figures saying that. If you're taking into account like Alex Jones, yeah, that guy's like off the rails. But in regards to also, there's people on the far left that are promoting the idea of child drag shows and things such as that. So to demonize one side without showing, and I don't even want to say personal responsibility because no single person in this panel is responsible for an entire group of people. I don't agree with that. I think individuals are responsible for themselves. So to say that their alt-right is horrible, yeah, I agree. They do try and hold people back. They do want to enforce their religious views on the people. And then I think there's people on the left that do fall into moral degeneracy involving children and things such as that. And it does exist on all specters. But yeah, I think the country will be better off in some capacity going more progressive. But overall, the case should be do whatever the hell you want. The government should not be intervening. If a baker doesn't want to bake a cake for a trans couple, he shouldn't be forced to do it.
Old,
Freedom for all.
right?
Next is going to be Rob.
Cosmical
Okay, so the
Cat,
problem with
welcome,
this
by
topic
the
is gonna
way.
be, how do we define the left? So in
Think
some senses,
Viejas
we do need to go more
is
left, and what
old?
traditionally were considered left-wing values, such as free speech. Like Berkeley was considered a home of free speech. Now the modern left is anti-free speech. So when they say go more left, they mean more we should deplatform people. We shouldn't
Yes.
engage with people that disagree with
Nailed
us.
it.
We need to censor everyone we disagree with. We need to have cancel culture, et cetera, et cetera. So no, we don't need any more of that. The way the left is considered today, how we understand how it's practiced in
How you
the country
say
as we see it
the-
today. No, we don't
hold
need
on.
more of it. And the first thing we have to ask is, what direction has the pendulum be swung?
No
Almost every
hablo
institution of this country
inglés
has become
or
far more left-wing.
español.
And could you say the country is better
However,
now than it was, say, even what we considered on the left 10, 15
I know a
years
little
ago?
bit.
No, I don't think so. Specifically when the question talks about culture. We could see, for example, academia is a cesspit at this point, and that's because such a radical shift to the left. You don't have to take my word for it. You could
I'm
take
not sure I
left-wing
understand what
professor
you're saying, but
Jonathan
welcome.
Haidt, who founded Heterodox Academy, that
Bienvenido.
talks about the indoctrination that comes with the radical shift in extreme left-wing politics that's occurred in academia. You could talk to James McWhorter that talks about the toxicity and the new racism is anti-racism, where he talks about the elect, the critical race theory people that want to demonize people based on their skin color and make the world focus victimhood and skin color. We'll talk about the trans issues. That's the next topic, so I probably won't focus on it much here unless it really comes up. But yeah, I think free speech and things like that are important. We've
Yeah.
shifted too far radically to the left. It's causing division.
Yeah,
in this
that's a
country
great
that
analogy.
we haven't seen for decades.
Looks like
and
a
it's really
pinata.
bad
It's
thing. So
colorful,
instead,
but
what
it
we need to
breaks
do
the
is
human
shift
who
back
sits on
towards
it.
the
That's
right
great.
culturally, while understanding that what we really need in this country
What a
is
great
balance of
analogy.
ideas from the past and from progressing. Like those things are important. You don't just throw out the entirety of the past. So we'll get into a definition of what we consider left and what parts of the left would be good. But certainly right now, our culture has radically shifted in every institution, including corporate America, that's continuing to exploit people using the ideals of the left and lip service of the left. That's how bad this shift to the left's become. We now have Nike that's going to criticize the United States, or LeBron James that'll criticize the United States while they're dealing with China. Will move Major League Baseball will move from Georgia over a reasonable law, but they'll still have games in China. And so this is what the left's allowed. Corporate America has totally co-opted this radical shift to the left, and it's leading to a disaster for this country and for workers and other people that we talked about previously.
Okay, so the round is open. You may engage freely. Again, remember the rules. Continue.
You muted, Bosch. I think you are. Yes.
Sorry, well,
Champion.
you know, the
Our
safety,
mighty
you know,
champion.
You should have just let him keep going for like a minute.
moving
Oh, by the
around.
way,
Why didn't you just let me keep going for a couple minutes? Come on, I could have been building to something. Okay, I take issue to several points there. First and foremost, there's one thing that I don't want to discuss here, and it's corporate performative wokeness, okay? Because that is not the left. So right now, there are more Democrats than Republicans in America, more progressive-minded people, I guess, than the opposite. And for that reason, corporations stand to make money off of virtue signaling to that demographic. They have done this for all of the history of businesses. Back in the 1950s and 40s, they were virtue signaling with their like anti-black messaging. No Irish need apply. Further beyond that, there were businesses which would advertise themselves as being, you know,
nailed
like
it.
back in the abolitionist days. Always, always, always. If a business thinks that it can make money by appealing to a certain set of moral sensibilities, it will
Yeah,
do
that,
so.
that
And
that's
right
the
now-
problem.
Can I ask a
is
question?
the,
Real quick
the
question on
points
that? Yeah,
where
sure.
the sides
Would you say
differ
back in the 50s
are
and
just
60s that one of the solutions was we should have had a shift
too
to the
far
left?
apart to
Well,
find some
I mean,
middle
yeah, 'cause
ground
the
on.
civil rights movement
Right,
happened,
and it's
so.
going to
And a
be
lot of it
worse
is
if the culture has
ideologically
shifted
driven,
so
which
far to
is
one direction
gonna
or the
be
other that we'll see that it'll
really,
be worse. Why do you
really
think
hard
you're admitting
to
right here that we've already
shifted
shifted massively to the
overcome
left. Right, we've shifted
on any
massively to the
short-term
left.
time
That's why
scale at all.
corporations are virtue signaling to it.
Wait, hold on.
Well,
Well,
actually,
so to
Rob,
me,
I
that's
got this.
so-
He's saying that they've done this entire history, like, and I agree with Vosh on this.
Right,
too.
right,
The
that's
business-
right.
It was just
To
a
the
different
right and to the
context. Yeah.
Yeah, but like
It was
but
virtue
the-
signaling for the sake of like racism. Instead, like Jim Crow era, saying, "Hey, we don't serve black people," and it was like, "Oh yeah, I'll shop there." But now
yeah,
today,
they've
it's
done
been
this
more.
forever. I mean, but
Yeah.
this isn't like the left. It's not co-opting the left. That process of corporations trying to make money by repping the values of their perceived customer base is as old as commerce itself. If I wouldn't,
reason they're doing it to the left now is because we've had a radical shift to the
well,
left.
the
If we
reason
didn't have
we've
that shift, corporations wouldn't be virtue signaling.
well, hold on. The
I
society,
think both are actually saying the same
society-
thing.
Wait, I want to make sure Vosh gets the period to respond to
I
that.
just want to say society has been moving to the left for hundreds of years. That process has been fairly ongoing. Whether we're talking about the treatment of like non-heterosexual people or non-white people or just basically any minority demographic, society has slowly been getting more progressive. And unfortunately, your concern has been echoed throughout the ages because the stuff you're saying right
You got to
now
learn from
is
all
what they said
people.
after
That's part of the
slavery
problem
was
with the
abolished. It's what
internet
they
is
said
it
after,
created a
the
whole
suffragettes
shit ton
were
of
allowed to
echo
vote. It's what they
chambers.
said after the civil rights movement and the gay rights movement in the 1980s. They said it in
A lot of
2015 after gay marriage was made legal
streamers,
statewide.
chats,
Always the criticism
and communities
is we've gone
included.
too far left, but now it's time to shift back to the right. We're going too far into degeneracy. We're going too far into anti-American values. Well, to me, I don't really care how far left or right we are. I care about addressing the problems we face with solutions that work. And right now, we have a lot of problems that I think could be fixed by moving further leftward. I felt
Correct.
that way about the civil rights movement, or I guess I would have if I'd been around back then. You know, I certainly feel that way about, you know, the Jim Crow and slave days. It always seems like a shift leftward helps, and that the conservatives are the ones clinging on to the dust of history, while progressives are the one making the new bold argument that a generation later gets accepted as standard fare. So what we need to talk about right now is what are the problems we can face and what can we address them with? To me, we got a lot of racism, a lot of sexism, a lot of transphobia. We can address that. We can address it sensibly. Some of these things can be addressed without any government intervention. It's just a cultural shift. And some of it maybe needs a little bit of wealth redistribution. But if we fix these problems once, they're fixed forever. And I think that's something worth investing in.
I got to disagree with you in regards to I don't think that it's going to be fixed forever. I think we're dealing with issues that exist since the dawn of mankind. I think these issues, I think as long as ignorance exists, we will always have these issues. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. But
Make
I
it
do want to
better,
bring it.
then?
Yeah, that I would say yes. We could
Okay,
do our best
all
to
right.
make it 100%. But the thing that does disturb me in a sense is that I feel like there's a lot of people in regards to cancel culture, the restricting rather of free speech. Disagreeing with people. I know before we actually started the debates, Demon Mom and Rob were discussing transgenderism and things such as that.
Yeah,
And having a simple conversation like
I
that,
don't know
think
that
is exactly what's
meteorites are
needed
the
these
real
days.
enemy because
But
they'll
unfortunately, regardless of what
eliminate
y'all were actually saying, it's like there's a lot of people don't want to actually
the
have
real
these conversations
enemies,
because
right? We're
it's
all
been
just fighting
classified
each
and
other
labeled
on
that
what
if you
we
disagree
think
with
is right.
somebody over some one instance,
You know?
say for example, transgenderism.
The real enemy is
instinctively,
lack of
people naturally go
education,
to
I would argue.
transphobic. And phobia meaning denoting the fear of. There can be actual disagreements with people and regarding what they stand for and say, I disagree with you. Doesn't mean I hate you. Doesn't mean I think you're a bad person. Doesn't mean I think you're a bad human being. I just disagree with you. And I
Listen,
think
bro,
that's what we need to
like
get
a-
more back
so
towards.
there's like a lot I'd like to speak on this, seeing as how this is something I deal with on a daily basis. And in fact, on the last panel I was on here, I did encounter some pretty explicit transphobia. See, the problem is, it's not that people don't understand or want to understand and want to have a question. It's that they never get to that point in the first place. And I will give Rob a lot of credit for this because Rob is one of the, on this particular issue that we disagree a lot, Rob is quite personally very respectful to me. And most right wingers are not. That is just a fact. I have encountered this so much. I engage constantly. I have people in my chats constantly, and I'm always willing to have a dialogue.
I don't know why it keeps
as long as
doing
some
that
basic respect can
little
be established. But
blippy
that basic
thing.
respect is almost never
Well,
granted.
Demon Mama, you've been disrespectful to me since we started.
I don't think I've been disrespectful because of your identity.
I would highly
disrespectful because
disagree with
came
you.
in here talking.
No.
about
Regardless of what I
identity.
disagree with you on, you were disrespectful.
Um,
It had nothing to do with identity. It had everything to do with what topic we were
if your
discussing.
feelings
You
are
were
hurt,
disrespectful.
if
So
if your
based
feelings are
upon
hurt, if your
what you
feelings
just
are hurt,
quoted
if your
me,
feelings- I know you're jumping in. You don't want to have me talk, but if your feelings are hurt, I'm very sorry that your feelings were hurt.
you see, now
This
you're
was
just being
you know,
now you're
this
being
is a-
condescending
that's-
again. You see,
You
so
can
it's
condescend
based
to me
upon
once,
what you
but you have
Okay,
the past.
Based upon everything
there's
you've
three
just
people
said.
talking. One second. There's three people talking at once.
Yikes.
And here's the pro tip.
Yeah, I don't
know
think
John
COVID's
must
from
understand this.
space.
He's hosted panels. It's crazy. This is magic, actually. When three people talk at once, you don't get triple A information. You get none of it. So what we're gonna have is
Wise.
Demon finish their point, then John, then Vosh. Fair? Demon.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of ways. We have a lot of ways to
roughly,
go. I don't really
yes.
like the idea that
This is the
Civil
open
Rights Act
discussion
getting basic,
section.
equality for Black people in America should be considered like a far swing to the left, and that we need to go back from that. Like, what should we just have some slavery? Like, no, I don't. I think that's a ridiculous false equivalence. We need to go to the left because the world has been staunchly locked in a far right worldview for most of history, and it sucked for most people. For myself, there's like a couple of things I really wanted to talk on before I yield my time. The first one being that 10 years ago, I couldn't get healthcare because I was trans. That's it. Just because I'm trans, that was considered a pre-existing condition, and I would be ruled out of getting health care that I needed. That's pretty discriminatory. That's pretty unfair. I don't have a choice in that. It's just who I am.
All
Next,
good.
the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that the right is the king of cancel culture. The religious right has been the main people trying to stop all forms of artistic expression, from freaking out about metal, from trying to frame D&D as like satanic.
Lil Nas X.
Yeah, Little Nas
What's the
X, they're
name of the
doing it today.
YouTube
It happens
channel?
all the time. Hell, you could even go so far as to say that the right wing having a collective meltdown, and they did. Every major popular channel on the internet has had a meltdown over Hasbro deciding, or Mattel deciding to say that we're going to have it be Mr. or Potato
Also, you
Head
should
versus
go
Mr. and
subscribe to
Mrs.
my
Potato
YouTube
Head,
channel
and
while
having
you're
a
at it.
meltdown over, wokeness
While we're
gone too
chatting
far.
about
It's just-
YouTube.
they're freaking out. They are the kings of fucking cancel culture. And this has been the case forever. The Hays Code was predominantly Christian. It was made to appeal to the traditional Christian Republican right in America. All of these things have been, for the longest time, the domain of the right wing. And so you get mad that a couple of people on Tumblr criticize your shitty Twitter takes. Well, that's not cancel culture. I'm sorry. Now, mob mentality is always going to be a problem no matter what stripe of the world you come from. But the idea that the left is the ones doing cancel culture, when it's only recently that even Tumblr and the internet even existed so that people could call you out on your bad takes, that's not cancel culture. You're just getting a little bit of criticism when before
Easy.
you ruled the culture.
We already live in a global economy. Global trade is far superior. Far superior. Not even a question.
Absolutely. Like, and Vosh made a good point as well. He's talking about that people would virtue signal in regards to being racist, and people would favor that. They'd want to shop there. I'm not going to say that doesn't exist. 100% it did, and that's why I think progressivism has come in and actually done a lot of good. In that
It is
capacity,
superior.
where I think more and more conservatives, I'm
You
happy
wanna
to
know
see this
why?
starting to understand the importance
Because not
of
every
separation of church.
country has the same resources and the same proportion of those resources as every other country, right? It's that simple.
Insurance, fucking medical health, excuse me. No, you shouldn't be discriminated upon that. Again, I think that's not right. But to say that the right is the king of cancel culture, I disagree with that. You had Gina Carano that was just fired from Disney because she made some beep bop boop tweet, and that wasn't even in regards to transgenderism, and they jumped on her for it. So to sit there and try to pin this all on the right and act like the left hasn't had like their hand in this pot, I think that's very disingenuous, intellectually dishonest. Yes, they absolutely have. Both sides are guilty of this. They did it with Sean Hannity. When Keurig was going to drop Hannity, then the Republicans rallied and said, "Oh, we're going to throw out our Keurigs." Like, okay, well, you're throwing away a good coffee maker. They already got your money. What sense? So to sit there and say that it's just one side is very unfair and it's very unbalanced. But what I say the right is like probably spawned
No.
it.
Demon Mama
Yeah,
didn't
to an
say
extent,
only
possibly,
one
but
side.
Why are we pointing fingers at this point? If we all agree that cancel culture is bad, pointing fingers at one another isn't going to solve that problem. But it seems like that's what this has turned into, is just
I mean,
a
I can
constant.
explain that.
No, you've talked. I'm going to speak now. So when you sit there and we want to finger point, we're not achieving anything. Sure.
Gina's the Star Wars person, right? Okay, just continue. Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, Gina Carano, yeah. So there's been a lot of that. And if companies want to bend the knee, I'm not against that. Like, I'm not against Disney firing her for it. If that's the route they want to take, I believe it's your right as a business owner. Do what you see fit. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. But to go off the other stuff as far as progressive, I think there's been a lot of good that's happened as a result. We've seen a lot more push for equal rights and things such as that. Yeah, 100%. But again, I do feel like, and I do agree with Vosh, that whether it goes left or right, for me, it's like I wish it would favor more individual liberty, which I think encompasses what I want, and also what I think Demon Mom wants in regards to you being treated for your health. And I think that should be all encompassing, whether it be left or right. I think that's a basic human freedom. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, like I recognize that there are some examples that you could sort of.
Yeah, but you got to be careful there,
Thanks,
because
but,
that's like
A lot of that was
that's
directed towards Demon Mama, so
an
I'll make
appeal
sure
to
they have
authority, right? So you trust the FBI and the CIA and the NSA as if they have no nefarious intent on their own, which you might want to dig into.
Public television show that's run by a corporation. The corporation made that decision to distance themselves from her. I mean, to me, that's not really the same thing as me literally not being able to have the right to health care because the laws in the country that are pushed and defended predominantly by the right wing of America. Yeah, like these are totally different things. I get it. It's frustrating when people get mad about products or they get mad about a person that they don't like in their show. But this stuff happens all the time, by the way. Like this happens even for like non-political issues.
I don't know.
Somebody wrestling is a great example of this.
Depends
We
on
all
your
love wrestling here.
perspective. I think
In
this
wrestling,
open
there's been a million
discussion can
times
be
where
extremely
somebody won a
illuminating.
fight and half the fan base thought they didn't deserve to win that fight, freaked out, and it caused Vince McMahon to do something to make more money. You know, this
I think it
happens all the
depends
time.
on what you're
Obviously,
looking
that is
for out of the
irrelevant.
memos
When we're
or out
talking
of the
about
chat.
right versus left with regard to cancel culture, it was the right that pushed through things like the Comics Code, which outright banned horror comics. Like that's artistic expression being strongly clamped down. It's the right that pushed through fucking music censorship. The right has a bad track record on this.
But who are you convincing though? Like when you're sitting there saying the right or the left, who are you convincing? Like if you're wanting, I think the ultimate goal is that you're wanting to win me over to your side and support your argument, correct? Which I think is the premise of all debate. But by you continuously finger pointing, it was the left that canceled Gina Carano. But I think both the points that we're making are 100% accurate. The cancel culture is cancerous. It needs to go away. It needs to stop. But again, the idea of finger pointing and saying you did this, you did that, both sides are guilty of this. So if you want to continue the Mr. Potato Head,
And
yeah, do I
he's
think
right
we're
there.
getting worked up about stupid stuff? I think it goes back to what Vosh said, and I've said that many times in my own following. This is corporations playing upon the dollar bill. They honestly don't care. If you really think large-scale corporations and businesses really give a damn about your individual rights or the fact that you're trans, they don't. They really do. You know why? Because they know you're going to spend money. It's actually reported that black demographic spends way more money on clothing and shoes, and that's why Nike doubled down with Colin Kaepernick and the flag, all that stuff. Go look at the statistics.
Sure.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
do you think Nike actually really cares? I don't think so. I really don't. I think they want to make a lot of money. But again, then your point actually still stands with regards to the right pitch the knip fit of Colin Kaepernick and everything. It's like, oh my God, we're going to boycott him. Again, I'll be completely transparent. When Kaepernick took a knee, it really pissed me off. But then again, I had to take a step back and really think about it, be educated. It's like, you know what? It was actually kind of a beautiful thing. The fact that this guy got to do that, exercise his free speech, protected, might I add, is fucking beautiful. Pardon my language. It's beautiful. I don't agree with it, but I can't sit here and cherry pick somebody's rights because I disagree with it. I think it's a very beautiful thing to see. Now, the NFL fired him, and then we go back into the whole idea of free market. They can do what they want. But again, go back to the original point. The finger pointing, that's not going to fix this problem. If we keep saying the right did this or the left did this, what are we going to fix? We're just going to keep sitting here going around the round table like, well, you did this. Okay, can we all agree that cancel culture isn't going to
I
fix
have a
anything?
point on this.
Yeah,
I'll
well,
get to
Nah,
eventually.
I yield. I'm sorry.
Vosh, you've been waiting a while, then Rob.
Yeah, so I don't know what we mean by cancel culture because there's a threshold where we all agree that it's okay to publicly denounce a person. If an actor won an Academy Award and they went up there and Sieg Heiled and gave a 3-minute speech on the need to eradicate Serbians from the earth, I'm pretty sure. I feel like I hope the conservatives would agree with me on this one. I hope we would all agree that hey, maybe we should sort of rethink hiring this person.
Oh man, I've already been told what I'm supposed to think by other people on this panel, so I'm kind of like.
Well, I'm
I
assuming.
know, I
I'm
agree.
taking an inference. So
I agree.
We know that at some point there's a type of behavior that warrants, I guess, what we would call cancel culture. What you said, John, is that you want conversations, and I love conversations.
Yeah.
To me, the problem is that oftentimes conversations are held in bad faith, or they're basically just held as a proxy to socially manifest whatever oppression is being discussed. So take trans issues. Trans issues are complicated, okay? I got a bachelor's in sociology, and my professors still didn't know what they were talking about with half those issues. I honestly learned more from the internet than I ever did from education or proper academia.
Yeah, I guess better late than never in
interpretations, and it's an
abstract
subject.
sense.
And a lot of
Although,
what we understand about trans issues runs in complete.
I mean, 20 years is a long
opposition to
time
what
for
we've
all
been
of the
told
information that
traditionally about men
was
and women
put
and
into
how
a
all this
memo
works.
to
And I think the discourse
change or
there is
become
not
completely
going to happen.
inaccurate.
It's a good thing.
But yeah.
Because otherwise, you can't just expect people to get on board with mantra. You can't just say, this is the dogma, this is the party line, roll with it. Right. But we have to recognize that this problem has happened before. We had this problem back during the 1960s, because back before then, used to be, you were white, you could just kind of say the N-word, you were kind of okay, you know, like it's just fine. And then it feels like, and it felt like to a lot of people back then, I know this because I talked to my grandpa's friends, somebody snapped their fingers, all of a sudden you can't say that anymore. And all the discourse changed and now it's not politically correct and so on. Now, that's not to say people who have questions about trans issues are the same as people who want to say the N-word. It's just that sometimes these big cultural snaps happen and it leaves a lot of people feeling like they don't have the right to even talk about what's just taken place. So I encourage the conversation. The only thing that I want to be careful about is, are the conversations that we're having good ones? And are they the conversations that might hurt the people the conversations are about? So some people like to, example, converse about, say, black-white IQ gap. You know, interesting subject for academic discussion, but people don't often talk about it because they're interested in the science. They talk about it because they're looking for a proxy by which to express hatred of black people. Sometimes you see that with the trans stuff too. It's not really a good faith conversation. It's just about bringing these issues to light so they can be used as weapons, as bludgeons to hit people with, you know? So we have to be careful about that. Maybe we'll have a couple of awkward years or decades on these issues, but I think that good faith conversation is the only way forward. But it has to be good faith. That's the only possible way to get through this.
I think based upon.
Next
sorry,
was
I'm
Rob.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Robin, I apologize. Robin.
Yeah. So first time to get to talk on this topic. So there's a lot to say. First off, everything that Demon Mama and John Burke were talking about, I could sum up in this. Cancel culture. When the right was the dominant force in culture, I would have blamed the right for that cancel culture. Now the left is the dominant force in culture. Guess who gets the blame for it?
I don't know if it'll be the next generation.
On this. I've been
I have a feeling there's
from the time I was a youngster. I
plenty more
Dee
dark
Snider and John Denver
days
going
to
on
come.
Capitol Hill to argue against censorship.
But I think
music.
at some point there will be a sort of another renaissance where people understand that divisiveness is just not productive.
For being offensive because he was making fun of the
I don't know
Catholic
about
Church.
this
Yes,
whole
all of
like
that stuff was
better
terrible.
at treating
And so when
oldies
Bosch
thing
talks about,
because
like,
you know
this stuff used
part
to
of it
happen
is
in the
like
past. Of course it used to happen in the past.
the
It was a
old
sign that
school
the pendulum
mentalities
swung
is
too
what's
far
keeping us
culturally to one side because
from
it wasn't just
making as much progress as we could
The
be.
real problem was that was the dominant cultural narrative.
No, we're
which
not the
those were
last
things that you could
generation.
say.
No
That's
way. I just
exactly
think
what we
there's
see
going to
happening
be
today,
more
except it's on the left.
darkness
And
before
I'm not
light
concerned
comes.
about Mr. Potato Head or even Gina Carano. I'm talking about things like the universities actually telling people that they can't teach right-wing perspectives that's occurring over and over. Again, not my words. This is a word of Heterodux Academy that's founded by a bunch of left-wing professors that talks about how terrible it is. And even left-wing professors that used to say, look, I'm basically lean more towards social programs and things. I'm afraid to even teach things on the opposite side of that anymore because we've gone so far to the left and there's so much power given to these people to just make accusations, such as the professor at Yale that just said, hey, maybe it's okay if someone dresses up like Pocahontas, but they're not Native American. That professor then gets circled and screamed at. This is occurring at university and campuses all over the place, and it's been occurring for 20 years, and now we're seeing it fester its way into corporations, into the media, and into other political ways, political venues.
I have a feeling, yep.
Now, the other thing that I think is worth talking about is we're just saying that, progressivism, that's all good. So, like, well, I agree, and we're going to talk about trans issues. Am I wrong? That's the third topic. So we could talk specifically.
Yeah,
on
it's
those
unfortunate,
issues,
but I think it is what it is.
Well, that's not necessarily
At this point, the path is for the most part chosen.
Stop doing that. In fact, many conservatives and many Christians, for example, think that treating people with dignity and respect, even if you disagree with their life choices, is something that should be achieved. In the same time that we hear the left saying, well, we need to treat people with dignity, some of the most vile, vitriolic things are being said, not just by random people on Twitch and Twitter, but by politicians. They're actually encouraging, like people like Maxine Waters is actually encouraging people to chase Republicans out of areas. We see the calls all the time to deplatform Republicans. I could talk about specifically things that critical race theory just being taught in federal government about how all white people are racist. This is being taught in federal agencies. That's how far we've shifted to the left. Again, you have people like James McWhorter, Eric Weinstein. These are traditional leftists that are saying, my God, this is getting too scary. The pendulum has swung too far. So the question we need to ask is this. We agree that if the pendulum swings too far on either side, that it'll lead to that types of forms of cancel culture. Where is the pendulum right now? And you've already conceded the pendulum has swung far to the left. That's why corporations are virtue signaling to the left. If the culture was on the right, then corporations would know it wouldn't be profitable to virtue signal on the left. So these problems that we see of the actual anti-racism, racism, going after whiteness, trying to reject whiteness, we see that there's now an industry in propagating race hoaxes because there's so, like with Jussie Smollett, there was just one that happened today at Albion College that just came out as another race hoax. These things are getting crazy. The radical push to the left has encouraged victimhood mentality, where the number one goal to achieve is how can I be the biggest victim? And it's encouraged this form of cultural Marxism, where instead of looking at people as individuals, I think there was a great man once that said we should judge people based on the content of their character. Now we're being told increasingly by the left that we have to focus on people based on the color of their skin. You even see senators like Duckworth and Humrono that are saying they won't confirm people based on the color of their skin. We see hospitals like in Boston putting out medical journals saying it's time to only accept, disproportionately accept people based on their skin color. We saw the CDC try to give out a vaccine and said
American
that
Airlines.
6.5 more percent people would die. And the number one factor that they gave as to why that was okay based on their recommendation was the people that died would be disproportionately white because elderly people were more disproportionately white. This stuff is running rampant. So all the like nice stuff that you're saying, like, well, hey, shouldn't we treat people with respect, like interracial marriage or gay people? Of course we would. That's not just a progressive mindset to treat them with respect. Right? That could be something that's on the conservative side as well. We could have arguments as to politically what the policy should be regarding those groups. But it is clear that right now the pendulum swung too far to the left. And if it goes further to the left, the insanity that you're seeing today will look like a cakewalk. They'll take away your right to speak. You hear people credibly talking about putting Trump supporters, 9/11 style commissions, putting them in re-education camps, using violence against people. We see the violence that's widespread in the name of the left, and all of it's deemed okay. Even people on the left
Make gaming great again.
And the pendulum needs to start to swing.
Yeah, it's free
Okay, so I
fiber
want
for
somebody who's on the
everyone.
left to kind of respond to this. Sorry, John, I have your name written down. I promise to get to you.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go
Got it,
ahead.
okay.
And we're gonna put a
That was
vending
just-
machine
there was
in
so
every
much,
hallway.
Like, there was so much there.
And there will be
Sour
free
chunks,
ice
but
cream
I
at
felt like
lunch.
everyone else
I feel like
did
every
something.
time it's one thing to talk, at length on
Vote
one
for
thing,
me
and
for
it's another
class
thing to
president.
just fire off like a list of totally contextless random things that sound vaguely scary. It's a lot of fear mongering, and it sounds like sort of conspiratorial, rattling off of these things. I mean, I feel like anybody could do this. I feel like a 9/11 truther could come on here and do the exact same thing. And what are you supposed to do? Ask them for a fucking book about it? Like, you got to keep your claims down. I don't even know what to tackle there. I did want to comment on one thing that John brought up, and I think that this might serve as a little bit of maybe a small olive branch between John Burke and I, which is that when I talk about finger pointing, it's not because I like hate the right or anything. When you talk about finger pointing, the reason why I point the finger at the right is because they're still doing this to this day. I mean, the RNC.
I feel like that was a little bit
is anti-gay
disingenuous right
marriage
there.
to this day. They are still. So like the problem that we have is that the right is still being predominantly the arbiters of the most serious forms of what you call cancel culture.
Oh hell yeah!
What's that?
That's
Sorry.
not, wait, no, hold on. So yes,
You're an
I will
owl.
agree with you
Oh,
that
sure,
definitely
sorry.
did stuff. That definitely did stem from the right. Yeah, I agree with you, 100% there.
Yeah, yeah.
But and that's what my hope is for in regards to the GOP to progress in the sense of being pro marriage, pro game, pro, but go even further to say pro do whatever you want. And there should be no government. But my question to you though is who's anti-gay that's a politician calling for this?
Wait. Like as
Anti-gay
far
marriage.
as anti-gay marriage. Wait, that's literally the platform of the RNC in 20.
Can you show me?
2020. Yeah, just look it up. I promise you. Just go to the RNC's platform. They were against gay marriage in 2020.
Yeah, the
This
grand
was-
old
The only
party,
reason I disagree with you,
conservative party, the
literally
Republican
heard
Party.
no one say anything
Also,
in regards to that.
Just so you know, Donald Trump, who was
Mm.
the Republican candidate controlling office, banned trans people from the military against the advice of the military.
That has nothing to do with
Also-
gay marriage, though. That's
Wait.
no.
No,
That's
I'm talking
nothing to do
about
with gay marriage.
examples. I'm talking about examples of what I would consider to be the most serious forms of
I don't even know.
of cancel culture.
It's a good
Yes,
question.
it is a fact that the Republican Party
I've never
has
looked that
included
up.
being, for traditional marriage.
I
even until
guess
this last election.
they're
And
just
maybe that'll
using
change. I hope it does,
DNC,
but until it does,
even though
I'm not going
there's
to stop pointing the
definitely-
finger at where it's due.
God damn
Sure,
it.
if you want to say that like the left gets really mad about
There's
Star
definitely
Wars, to me that's very, very
the
inconsequential
RNC
in terms of when we're talking about
versus the
actual
DNC.
legislation that affects the
I'm not
lives
sure.
of people like
I mean,
myself
maybe the Democratic
and,
Party just didn't come up with
all
the
over the country.
a
And we see
designation
this has a downstream effect
and
as well. When you
synonymous
have
with
people who are
or
willing
analogous
to push
to
blanket bans on
the
trans
grand old party.
People who are, you know, a vice president who less than 5 years ago was advocating in favor of conversion therapy for gay kids.
Yep.
That
Thanks, Pence,
this
you
has a
gigantic
downstream
piece of
effect
shit.
of what the accepted standard is in our country, and that is, in my opinion, a much more dangerous form of cancel culture than any of the
Yes,
I don't
we
even
need
know
more
other
letters.
things that have been rattled off here. I hope that we can agree that that's like a little more important than a Star Wars actress who maybe the fans of the Star Wars series are too woke and they don't like her jokes on Twitter and they got mad about it. Like, I recognize this could be a problem in certain circumstances, but it doesn't even compare to an entire group of people, my people like me, who were banned completely from serving in the U.S. military. Like,
if I can respond to that, because that was directed at me. I know, Rob, I know you want to get at Edge in real quick, but being that, so you keep bringing up Gina Carano, and you keep doing this compare and contrast using her as the example. That example was made originally in regards to leftist cancel culture. So what you're using it for in comparison right now is not applicable. You keep bringing that up. Now, you want to talk about conversion therapy for children and stuff like that. Do you think that that is covered under free speech and somebody's individual beliefs?
Do I believe that the right to torture a child?
No. Vote to speak it, to say it.
Oh, I have no
Sure,
idea.
they can say that, but I also have the right to criticize.
I haven't really heard anything about it.
To point that out.
I 100%
To point out
agree.
that we have somebody who became the
The
vice
good news is
president
Georgia
of
went the way
of
we
the
needed
United
it
States,
to.
and I can use this as a point to say, hey, actually, we haven't really swung very far left. If a guy who 5 years ago was advocating in favor of conversion therapy, which is torture, just for the record, is the vice president.
I think one of the problems we have with this discourse is that the term cancel culture equates a lot of different things that
Yeah,
cause
I agree.
different levels of harm.
I agree.
So I will say something. I'll acknowledge it up the front. First of all, there are a lot of people on the left, and I mean all the way up to academia, who are very, very sensitive and often engage in these ideas in a performatively bad faith or sometimes in a ridiculously condemning way. Like they go out to hurt people because they disagree. I think that is a thing that the left does from time to time. And I do think that right now the left has more power generally when it comes to wielding corporate support. There are more people who tend to agree with the left in terms of most.
I haven't heard about that.
BLM was supported at like 70% at its peak. Gay marriage about 70%
Gotcha.
right now. So these companies are going to tend to side more with those perspectives. Because
I don't really pay attention to anything that corporations put out in terms of statements for the reasons that were discussed
real world harm
just a little bit ago on this very
so with black
panel.
people, for example, the generational
Corporations
income
don't
gap
actually
between
give a
black and white
shit
people in this
about
country is
humanitarian
enormous.
issues.
When
They
we
care
talk
about
the
making
prison
money.
industrial
So whichever
complex,
humanitarian
the
issue is going to net
disparity,
them
in other
more
words,
revenue and
disparity
profit,
in the
that's the one they're
rates
going
and
with.
extent of incarceration
Not
and
difficult.
controlling for all of the other relevant factors. So when you're just looking
So
at
even
race,
if they happen to
black
say
people
the
get
right
shafted
thing, I'm going to
pretty hard
take
when it
that
comes
as
to trans
just
issues, all the stuff they have
because
to put
it's
up with.
designed
Healthcare
to
and discrimination
bring you
from
more
employers and
business,
gay people, blah blah blah. So
not because
these
you
are types of
genuinely
harm
believe
that
the
aren't
point
just
necessarily.
cancellation. I mean, this is serious stuff. This is marked social progress stuff. This is the stuff that people 100 years from now are going to look back and they're going to go, wow, glad I didn't live back then, you know, because everyone 100 years from now will be a black, gay, trans person, obviously. But the problem is, as long as those problems exist, people on the left are going to be sensitive about those issues. It's almost an immediate and inevitable reaction. As long as LGBT kids are at like an 18,
mean, like,
times higher rate to get kicked out because of their
like
sexuality
people
or
are
whatever,
boycotting
they're gonna
McConnell
be
and Fox
sensitive about
News?
those issues, and that sensitivity
If that's the
sometimes
case,
manifests in a way that's
good.
toxic or unfair. And I mean that when I say toxic or unfair, because I don't think, now I'm not saying this is either of you, John, Rob, but say you're a mom or a dad. I'll just use my parents. My parents are progressive people. Really, they vote Democrat, they're nice folk. But when I explained trans stuff to them for the first time like 6 years ago, they were lost. They were like 55.
Boycotting what companies?
It was beyond them. And, with time, I guess they've acclimated a bit to it, but I know that if they had had that
Oh, you mean like
conversation with the
Delta
wrong
and
type of
Coke?
left-leaning person, they would have been called a fascist.
For their statements?
I know that for a fact.
Oh,
I'm
even though,
thankful that I
yeah,
was the one to have
what
that
what
convo
what
with
were
their son.
Coca-Cola
As
and Delta
long as
Air's
these
statements, though?
problems exist, people will react to them in harmful ways. So I think what we have to do, the only thing we can do, is grit our teeth, try to ignore the discourse, and work on fixing the actual underlying problems. Because once we fix the actual underlying problems, we're no longer at risk of invalidating those concerns by criticizing people who are trying to cancel other people on social media. At that point, the discourse is open season because we're no longer fighting over an underlying set of real material problems, you know?
Yeah,
Rob?
and to build on that,
Yeah,
I just wanted
so,
to have one thing on there, just while this is relevant.
it'll be
while this-
quick, I'm sure. Go ahead.
It will be
Okay,
very quick.
20
All I just want
seconds.
to say is that that's fine. I just want to say that, like, do you blame people for being a little bit sensitive about this when you might not be able to get the treatment you need to live your life? If you might be fired from a job just for who you are, I can
What?
understand why young people on the internet are a little reactive about that. No, I'm just saying in general. Yeah.
No,
Rob?
I do get it. I do get it. It's just, you know, it's just an
Try-
unfortunate situation all around.
Okay, Rob?
Okay. Yeah. So again, what they're conflating is just something like Gina Carano or Mr. Potato. Like, I agree with Vosh that cancel culture could mean many things, but I think they're erroneous when they say that we're talking about actual policies on one hand versus just mean words on the other. That's not what's going on. Again, I cited in what I said last a bunch of real world implications. We now have sitting senators that are saying that they will choose to confirm someone based on their skin color. We have the CDC offering suggestion on who gets a vaccine, saying that their suggestion will result in 6.5% more people, up to 6.5% more people dying, but that's okay because they're disproportionately white. I could read like
Yeah,
I'll
this doesn't
just
surprise
read,
me,
some of the-
especially in
let me
light of
ask you
how
this, Demon
Georgia
Mama, if I
went
could just get a
in
quick answer.
2020.
What is torture about
Go
conversion
fucking
therapy?
figure.
Can you explain
That's
just
another
real
part
quick
of
why
the
that's torture?
Republican platform
I don't want to
that is
violate
just ridiculous,
TOS real quick,
and
but
it's
if I
voter
might
suppression.
explain very bluntly.
It's amazing.
Many common conversion therapy techniques involve placing electrodes onto the genitals of children.
Well, that's clearly torture. Yeah, if that
Yeah,
happens,
but guess
no
what?
doubt.
That's incredibly common. In fact, nearly every type of conversion therapy, which is basically parents having the ability to ship their kid off to a camp where they are told they are wrong for the most basic form of who they are, is a form of psychological
Okay,
torture.
let me just
This
let
is
me just ask you this.
wait,
Ben.
wait, hold
Do
on a
you
second.
think?
Wait,
Not done.
Do
You
you
have to
think?
wait,
Let me rephrase the question. Do you think that telling someone that there's an inherent flaw with them by immutable characteristics of how they were born is a really bad thing? Isn't that part of what's bad about conversion therapy?
I
Saying
don't
that
know
they're
what that-
more
Can you explain that further? Because that didn't
right,
sound
saying
like a
that the way someone was born makes them flawed. Do you think that's a terrible thing?
I don't know what that means. So I don't
Okay,
know.
Sure. Right. Great. So
I'm
let's
trying to
just go.
understand what you're trying
That's
to
fine.
say.
That's fine. So, in a series of events at the Treasury Department and federal financial agencies, diversity trainer Howard Ross taught employees that America was built in the backs of people who were enslaved, and that all white Americans are complicit in the system of white supremacy by automatic response to the ways we're taught. In the accompanying documents, Mr. Ross argues that whites share an inborn oppressive streak.
I should
Whiteness,
be the
employees are told,
moderator.
includes white privilege and white supremacy.
You know,
Consequently, whites struggle to own their race.
half the time I do feel like I should be a moderator in some of these panels because sometimes the moderators are way too fucking passive and they let people talk over people and shit on people like just way too much, and I would shut that shit down so fast. But again, that would bite me when it comes to the entertainment aspect of it, which means I wouldn't make as much money. Imagine that. Now, I'd be okay with that because I'd rather be engaged in a civil, respectful, and productive debate. But, you know, people don't like watching that shit as much, I guess. Fucking brainlets.
I'm going to be as diplomatic here as I possibly can. That is one of the stupidest comparisons I've ever encountered on any panel.
I
in my entire
appreciate
life.
the
idea that some
compliment I
random
think you
jackass
just gave
who
about
does
my
some
hair and
dumb
facial hair.
presentation to a bunch of like half asleep treasury workers that happens to like have some cringe takes about race on it is at all equivalent
I
to
will
shipping your
say,
kids away to facilities
it's not
where in many
orange.
cases they were sexually abused.
That's just the
in
lighting.
the name
Watch.
of converting
I can
them,
change
quote
it
unquote,
real
from their
fast.
sexuality or gender identity. That is like, it is offensive on like 10 levels. And this is the type of shit
I just
that I've
like
been
the
talking about. In
warmness.
fact, I had a note on here about
Perhaps I
talking
should
about
leave it like
building
this.
off of Vosh's point about good faith discussions. These types of
Okay,
things.
I'm going to interject.
Nah,
since
I
she
like
said
this.
was-
I like
guess
looking
this is how
tan.
it
Actually, you're
works.
not
I'll
going
just
to.
interject.
I will
Okay, I guess that's how it works.
actually-
Correct.
Wait, okay.
Next time I want to interject. I want to
Okay.
get in on that.
Okay,
There you go.
there's a lot of interjection, but I do.
But there's only one person interjecting. Let's
okay.
be clear.
Okay,
You.
but there was just 3 interjections.
I will
Okay,
say,
so
aside
I'm
from
gonna have
John
Jim
Burke
finish the
here,
point. We're gonna throw it to Rob, then we're gonna throw
I
it to
interject,
Bosch.
so now it's 4.
Okay, great.
I'm
Then John.
absolutely
Okay. Dear Mama, Rob,
the best
Bosch,
looking
John.
compared to all of these people.
I think this is an incredibly
He's a good looking
bad
dude.
thing,
Like you can tell
and
he
not only
works
that,
out,
but,
eats healthy, takes
like,
care of himself. He's like well built.
shockingly inconsiderate comparison to make between some corporate training or government training in some random division that you think is slightly objectionable versus
I
children
agree.
literally being tortured, which, by the way, it's not just me who says that it's torture. It's every serious medical and psychological organization in the world believes that that's torture. And you're going to try and play equivalence with that. I don't think that I owe that the time of day, but I'm going to give it just a little bit of time of day for the purposes of the viewers here. Conversion therapy is torture. You not liking a presentation that you have to see as an adult at your job and having a problem
Oh,
with
I
that
could
is not even
totally
close to
rock
the
a
same
fucking
thing.
purple suit.
With all
Okay,
due
now-
respect, stop being such a snowflake.
Rob?
All right, so it's ironic that she calls
So
us
we're going
snowflake.
ad
The
hominem
entire
here, okay.
presentation where we're talking about
Yeah,
the
I will
left
on
is her
this, yes,
claiming to be a
absolutely.
victim. She wanted to make this topic about trans because her identity is being a victim. That's totally the identity of Demon Mama, and she tries to interject that into every possible conversation. That's why she feels that she can interrupt people, treat people rudely because she feels she's a victim. And I only bring it up because it's a microcosm of the problem of the pendulum switching too far to the left. So she could behave in ways that are rude or just, it's not a big deal. I don't really care. She could interject. She could make all these proclamation and demands and get on a moral high horse. And it's all in the name of her claiming to be a perpetual victim. Now, if people are having things attached to their genitals, clearly that's a step further than what I was saying. I said it while you were saying that. Like, yeah, that's clearly torture. The majority of conversion therapy didn't include things like that. The thing that's offensive about conversion therapy that most people that understand what it is would say is it would be offensive to tell people based on the way they were born, if they were born in a certain way, that they needed to change who they were because there was a flaw with it. You saying that this just occurred in one agency, we're not talking about private people deciding what to do, although that might be immoral or heinous. We're talking about the left. The pendulum has swung so far that you're literally allowed to call all white people racist,
Yeah.
and that is taught in federal training
You're-
programs.
I
can
mean,
go
you're
through a
not
couple
wrong.
More real quick, there's literally dozens of these I can come up with. It's Sandia National Laboratories, which developed technology for
Yep.
American nuclear arsenal. Executives held a racially segregated training session for white male employees. The 3-day event, which was led by a company called White Men,
Blind,
is full
deaf
diversity partnership, the
people,
goal of examining
mute
white male
people.
culture,
Yeah.
making employees take responsibility for their white privilege, male privilege, heterosexual privilege. And one of the opening exercises, the instructors wrote on a whiteboard that white male culture can be associated with white supremacists, KKK, Aryan Nation, MAGA hats, and mass killings. On the final day, trainers asked employees to write letters to women and people of color, and people apologized for their privilege in being white and promised to be a better person. Department of Homeland Security diversity trainers held a session on microaggressions based on the psychologist Daryl Sue. In his academic work, Sue argues that white Americans have been fed a racial curriculum based on falsehoods, unboarded fears, and belief in
I
their own
wouldn't say
superiority, and thus have
inherently
been socialized
they
into
can
oppressive
feel
roles.
lies
Trainers thought that
better
Homeland
than
Security
others, but
employees are a
yeah,
myth
I
of
think
meritocracy and colorblindness is the foundation of
I think
racist microaggressions.
under
and
certain
micro inequities. The
circumstances they
trainers
do.
insisted
Sure.
statements such as America is the land of opportunity, everybody can succeed in this society if they work hard enough, etc., was racism. If white employees disagree, his point is dismissed as a denial of individual racism, which is another microaggression. The point is this stuff occurs all over the place at the federal government, at corporate America, and academia, and it's too far. All of the advances, even if we would concede, which I disagree, that all of the advances we were talking about of the left of treating people decently based on all of these characteristics, even if we say that was all part of the left, the problem is the only way we can advance as a society is to have a pendulum that doesn't swing too far to the extreme one side or another. When we have these arguments being made that people can't, this is what I'm talking about with cancel culture. You can't even disagree with this. We all know this. Like, you could pretend that it's not the case, but we all know this. For example, we saw with the Covington kids. Did you ever think we would get to a place where adult black racist and a Native American agreeing with them could surround a bunch of kids, make racial and homophobic slurs, and the media would demonize the kids and celebrate the adult racists that went after them? That's where we're at as a society right now, and it's infiltrating every single institution in this country.
Okay.
Okay,
Bosch,
hold
you're
on.
next. I know that's a lot.
Okay. So
I mean, it's a lot.
categorically,
Everybody's been shooting off a lot. Go.
categorically, I just want to point out that while I'm not saying the examples you've
Yeah,
cited are
polygraph
entirely
is not
invalid, the
reliable, and
reason
that's
you're
why it's
citing
not
these
admissible in
examples is because
court.
you can't do what I can do to prove the opposite. The fact that there are demographic disadvantages experienced by certain groups. So rather than me talking about individual examples or like this was like a bad workplace training seminar or something like that, I can just point to swath of disproportionate
Sure.
outcomes
Let me
for black and
do you
white.
mind if we just
I just want to say, I know that's not what you were trying to do. I know it's apples to oranges. So I just want to say that with regards to your arguments there, look, a lot of what you're talking about, I call it like these Robin DiAngelo like white guilt conferences. Okay, what it usually is it's like white people draft up a big PowerPoint presentation to show to other white people in some government or high corporate position where they explain how being white makes you mean or something. Look, white people, racism's a thing. White people have been dealing with the consequences of them enacting white supremacy broadly in society for a while now. Sometimes they while out and do some weird stuff with that. It's like cuckold porn, okay? There's a big market for that. Big black, muscular black guys having sex with white
We need one
wives, you know?
representative
Is
for
this
every
white people
color,
externalizing
shape,
their guilt and
size,
fetishizing it?
skin,
I don't know. This
skin
Robin DiAngelo
condition,
stuff strikes to me
disease,
similarly, okay? I'm
illness.
just not a big fan of how they handle it. I don't
if
like.
I could just ask you a question, like,
You know,
on this.
hold on. I
Oh,
think
no,
Robin
no,
had enough
Wait,
time
no, I
rattling
want
off.
to hear the question, but then I want to finish with the.
I just want to. So, like, for example, we would
No
say
questions
like,
about cuckold porn, please.
No. When you talk about like structural inequities, like, and I'll talk about that the next time we get to talk. But just to ask you, you would say one of the examples of the structural inequities, like law enforcement's treatment of Black Americans, correct?
Yeah, it's part of it.
Okay, well then, if would we also say that law enforcement's mistreatment of men, which are incarcerated, in all of the negative factors that compare whites to
massively.
blacks?
The criminal
Okay,
justice
so then how
system
is it?
treats
So the
men
left
worse
has
than it does
encouraged that.
black people.
That's right. So the left has caused the mistreatment of men, correct?
No, actually, the issue has gotten better because of feminism. Feminists have fought against many of the discriminatory practices that have led to the disproportionate sentencing of men. But yeah, men
So
do get
explain-
shafted in the criminal justice system.
That's right. And the point is this: the left and feminism, and what we see is often talking about the patriarchy and it's demonizing men. And the truth of the matter is
I
that
don't
you
believe
just want to
feminism
say,
is about demonizing men.
okay, but we could have that discussion. That's fine. But
There are
what we can
feminists
see
who
is
do
like
like
it's
men, but-
non-falsifiable. Like it's non-falsifiable what we see.
There
ends
you
up
go.
happening. You say,
Now
if
you're
there's
thinking,
inequities
all
in a
right?
group that we generally
You're a
consider,
political
a group
strategist
that's,
right here. You need to be a
minority,
campaign
or a group that's
manager.
underprivileged or oppressed, we say that the left can save them. We need the left. But if we see a group that the left considers to be a majority group or an oppressor group, that they're being negatively affected, you say, again, it's the left that can save them. And I make that point to say,
But
when you
the
talk
left-
about these
wait,
structural
so-
inequities, just real quick, when you talk about these structural inequities and how that's different, you aren't proving that a further shift to the left would benefit these structural inequities anyways.
Because the term "a further shift to the left" is so vague as to be useless
Stop it.
here. When we're talking about the disparity between men and
I
women's
don't even
treatment
know
in the
who
criminal
that
justice
is
system, we're
or what
talking about
that
a
series
disparity that
is.
has been alleviated thanks to feminism. There isn't some group of men's rights advocates who've been doing the work on this. Feminists have been doing the work on that. In this regard, yes, with regards to the criminal justice system, men are oppressed. It feels funny saying it, but it's true. The disproportionate sentencing of men significantly outstrips the disproportionate sentencing that black people experience relative to white people. Now, do many people talk about this? No, because a lot of people on the left and the right don't disagree with the underlying biases that lead to that being a problem. They say, yeah, men are more dangerous. Men should be locked up for longer. But I feel like that's an issue that the left, while not entirely, has been at least partially working on. So to speak to the broader point there, I don't like these Robin DiAngelo conferences. I don't like this whole telling white people that they're all racist by default of being white thing. I don't think these conversations are productive. And frankly, I think that their content runs antithetical to what I was taught sociologically. The idea behind intersectionality isn't that like some power groups are worse than other non-power groups. It's that we're all bound up in a huge collection of different types of biases, benefits, and negatives that make up and shape our life experiences. So a white person may be racist. That's a thing that can happen. But why are they racist? Probably because they live in a society that allowed them to internalize some ideas about race. But they aren't the only ones who live in that society. Latin, Asian, and black people live in the same society, and there are plenty of black people who have internalized basically the same ideas about themselves that white people have internalized about them. It's all really complicated, and that's why I do not like these conferences, these workplace training panels. It's because they simplify it. They make it essentialist. They tell white people they should feel guilty. I don't think
Yang
that's
gang,
good. I don't
dude.
think any person should feel guilty for a thing they haven't done. But we need to be clear again.
Yeah,
while these
UBI
things
is an
are
interesting
problems,
discussion, I
and I
suppose.
do want them addressed, I don't think this speaks to the incredible disparity between the types of real problems conservatives are trying to address and the types of real problems that people on the left are trying to address. Because I would take the left side on those issues pretty much 99 times out of 100. It seems like they have a much better idea of what solutions need to be levied here. And as a final point, very last one, yeah, conversion therapy is pretty bad. I don't know how we got on that topic. I left for a pee break a second ago. I legitimately missed how we got there.
I got it. So basically what happened was the topic of conversion therapy came up, and Rob Noor was, I believe, somewhat comparing it to the classes some corporations have on whiteness. I believe
Federal government.
Yeah, or federal government. Or
saying that someone's born evil or someone was born flawed and having a conversion therapy for it is wrong.
I would agree with that.
Not what conversion therapy is.
I have a question for you.
Comparison. It is a stupidly offensive comparison, and it actually drives me nuts that nobody's jumping on this. Like with all due respect to you, Vosh, I love you, but holy shit, this is such an absolute fucking false equivalency that I can't even believe it. You're talking about some rattling off so fast that nobody in the audience can even understand it. And thank God, because their heads would have probably collapsed from how stupid it was to compare some random, like poorly put together Robin DiAngelo, like training to systemic conversion therapy that in the best of circumstances involves shipping your kids away to a mental asylum where they will be taught on a daily basis. They will be monitored and taught to reject the most core parts of their identity. A type of therapy which is shown to induce severe and long-lasting mental health issues. And you have the gall to call me the fucking victim here? You absolute sad snowflake. You should walk away from this with your tail tucked between your legs. You sad, pathetic piece of shit. Now, I'm going to go to the bathroom.
Wait, I had a question. Okay, wait, hold on. I had a question.
Okay, to be clear, that was pretty.
Was that a violation? I'm sorry. Was that a violation of your policy rules, Dylan?
Which rule? Which one?
What she just did? Was she being nice? Was that considered
well,
nice?
No,
Didn't you say to be nice?
I said at the beginning I suggested it, but it isn't a rule. Okay? It's like it's a
Vosh, if I said to you real quick, this is all I'm saying. If I had a seminar at the federal government where I said black people are inherently inferior and they need to repent for their blackness, you would be like, that's crazy.
First of all, I need to be a stickler for details here, because usually these conferences aren't saying white people are inherently inferior. It's usually that they're subject to a set of preconditioned biases that are ingrained in them by society, and this affects almost all white people. It's not a moral essentialization in the same way.
All
just
white
saying
people are
black
racist.
people are
All white people are racist and need to repent.
Well, depending on which academic you ask, you would say that all people are racist, period. And that's a language that I tend to subscribe to myself.
Let's be clear. I read specific
I want to ask you this question
examples.
very badly. I'm begging you to receive this question.
Sure.
The issue that I have with this comparison. No, wait. I'll answer that in a second. The question that I have
Are you talking about like
given
the chat,
fact that
like this?
It seems
this
like
panel?
the left is fighting for groups which are demographically disadvantaged.
I think that's more.
What changes would you want made? Because I don't like.
That's
these
more
Robin DiAngelo
indicative
workplace
of how much
seminars,
time
but it
has passed
seems
in the
like they're,
debate, because debates tend to
deviations
devolve
from an
into
otherwise fairly consistent set of policies and cultural
less
prescriptions
structure
which
and
maintain white
civility
hegemony.
over time.
Like, I agree these things aren't good, but the reason why
I think you could start
exceptional
at
is
3
because
o'clock in the
pretty
morning,
much
and I think
every
by
other
7
measurable
a.m. people would be
demographic in
bitching at each
society,
other. And
white people tend to be on top, whether it's representation in higher government, CEOs, whether we're talking about educational attainment or wealth disparity. So even though these things are a problem, we're not talking about a problem that is manifesting itself is to such an extent that it's leading white people to be oppressed. So given that people on the left seem to be fighting for the oppressed, what changes do you want made? How do we address that oppression without, in your mind, enabling
that's why.
some sort of backlash?
Okay, that was like the longest question in the world.
But
no
right
problem.
after that, John Burke hasn't got to talking forever, so I do want to give
right.
him a
Oh,
chance.
God. Well, shelf it then, I guess.
No, go ahead. I'm interested in hearing Rob's.
Okay. So here would be my answer. Just because you're saying that you're speaking up for a problem doesn't mean that you're necessarily solving it. In fact, it seems that a lot of the so-called liberal and leftists that seek to speak up for minority communities are doing so from a position of privilege anyways. And so just because they pay lip service to the cause doesn't mean that they're getting results. For example, we could see the most left-wing controlled political areas in this country claim to be speaking up for African Americans and other populations, but actually they're worse off in those areas than they are in most other areas. We could also see that the left is It's all just real quick. Like you got to, we can see that this sort of mentality has led to a like all you have to do is look at like the left talks about helping the poor. So let's go to LA and look how the poor are doing. Not good. The left says that they're going to help black people. Let's go to the areas they control and see how things are going. Not good. So you're conflating the idea, and we've already like. So you're conflating the idea. If we see groups that are disproportional, you say, and we acknowledge those groups, or we claim that they are oppressed groups, then it's the left seeking to help them.
No,
but I would argue a lot of the policies of the left. No, it's let me finish. I would argue that a lot of the policies
Democrat
of the left
governors, therefore the left is causing black poverty, is a completely ridiculous point. Black people tend to live in areas that like inner city areas for a wide variety of demographic reasons, and they tend to vote Democrat because Republicans have been more overtly racist in the past 40 years. The fact that we're not talking about which leaders are doing what. We're talking about solutions. I want reparations. I support Black Lives Matter. I want criminal justice reform. I want police reform. The ideas that I and the rest of the left are proposing, infrastructural reform, jobs programs, these are ideas I have that assist the impoverished, that assist the oppressed.
So for example,
I don't want to run off
the areas,
with this, like,
So we can see the areas that have came closest to embracing the ideologies of the left you want are actually worse for the very populations that they're claiming to solve. In addition to other people, and so for example,
that have hurt those people.
Well, so for example, Black Lives Matter, you say you endorse. Homicides are up almost 200% in inner city America, in many inner city African American communities because Black Lives Matter pushed a Black Lives Matter pushed a narrative that led to defunding police or demoralizing police, which has directly led almost every time
wait. No,
this is where he goes off the deep end. I said earlier that this guy is a fucking lunatic. This is where he starts going off the deep end.
Because of the pandemic. There's no evidence for that whatsoever.
No, they're absolutely.
Yeah, good question. I don't know. Just some random image, it seems, and it's not even like properly. Like the cameras aren't properly oriented. Like they're cut off on the sides.
Because they cut the salary of the police that they were giving.
They did. They cut them by like about 16 million. No, hold on. Can I just interject something real quick? So to go off of what Vosh and Rob are talking about here, there are parts I agree and disagree with both of you. I think that in a sense that the BLM definitely had inflammatory rhetoric that pushed in regards of which helped with the overall idea of defunding.
I mean,
the police,
actually, I don't know.
Horrible idea. We need police reformation. We need better training. So I think that's. Is that what you're saying, Rob? In regards to that's how it led to it? Like, not saying BLM is the cause, like the direct, like they were the ones that went in there caused this violence. It was the propaganda pushed by the BLM in regards to defunding the police, which led to the increase in violence. And actual Seattle, important places like that, it was actually shown. There's articles all over about that. They're actually saying, hey, we cut funding in the wrong areas.
Reminiscent of it.
Now we have police that are not being paid. Police are quitting.
Like, it seems like the leaves
qualify people to apply. Therefore, we're having a spike in violence. So I think yes,
I do agree but as soon as you get to the inside, it's not,
because people were stuck at home. You have like the case of the Les Miserables, Jean Valjean stealing a loaf of bread to feed his family. I can't blame these people when they're told, by the way, by the government that you can't work. What are you supposed to do to make ends meet? Well, you turn to criminal activity, and I can't say that I blame these people. I can't. I would do the same thing to feed my family. But at the same token, yes, I think that a lot of what the BLM supported, or a lot of the inflammatory stuff that got pushed out, and I wanted to lead into this point, is that I think that we're looking at the zealots in each movement and painting the entire movement because of the extremists. And I think that's magnified due to social media.
Yep.
I think a lot of these things that you've discussed, like everybody's discussed, were needed in our society. We did need to progress. We did need a lot of issues. Say, for example, like BLM brought some very good issues to light in regards to economic disadvantage by the black community, mainly inheritance wealth, which had they not pushed that, I never would have actually said, you know what?
I haven't made a dollar.
And a lot of Republicans will, no, I don't want to hear that. As like,
I know I don't have a pool or a tub.
And the reason I think a lot of Republicans' ears are closed, or we are consistently being and told that, well, you're this,
I've made $6 from my streams
of a movement that are like the representation of the whole.
I've spent significantly more than that, but I made $6.
So a good faith conversation, I agree, is needed. But when you're screaming at me, when instantly you're calling me a populist or snowflake or then the conversation shuts down. We're not going to have a discussion. If we're going to sit here and virtue signal, pound our drums about how angry and upset we are because we disagree with somebody, we'll make no headway. We'll have no discussions. We will just shut down. But To go back to the
Wait, I
overall
just-
point. Go. I'm sorry. Go
You
ahead.
know,
I
I don't
just-
agree with this
I need to
guy's
finish that because, Rob, I feel like you
conservativeness,
completely
but I
avoided that
kind of
point.
like that
So
guy.
yeah, crime has been down in the past year. Murders are up, but it's because of lockdown. People are unemployed, staying in their houses, getting mad, and killing their spouses. The idea you just spewed off a narrative that is not only not supported by the evidence, like I think you just made it up on the spot that the crime escalated because BLM demotivated police officers, and you avoided the central question, which is why is it that all the ideas that I as a left-leaning person have seem to serve the interests of helping oppressed people? And then when I bring that to you and I ask you, what would you do? What would your solutions to these problems be? Instead of answering that, you say, well, look at these Democrat cities. How are they doing? Well, I don't like Democrats. And I don't, by the way, think that cities are doing generally in America particularly well. Find me a major city in America that doesn't have its problem with crimes, homelessness, poverty, racial inequity. What I want are ideas that will work. National solutions or local, something that will alleviate this oppression. We can talk about it with crime, with race, with income. We can talk about the gay or trans people. We can undo the trans military ban. We can make it so that it's no longer possible to fire
Sometimes
people
points
for being LGBT
are
in
that
states
incoherent.
that don't have laws protecting as such. There are things that we can do, and I support these solutions, but either you ignore those problems or you find a way to address them that doesn't contribute to this cancel culture you're concerned with. So how do you do that?
Right. So what I was saying was that just because you're saying we're advocating for this group, one, many people do that from a position of privilege, that they're just virtue signaling that they advocate for that group. So it doesn't. And second, just advocating for a group isn't necessarily that you'll bring solutions to them. I would solve these problems in a totally different way. I think the more we focus on race, the worse race issues become. This has been shown to be the case when we look at all metrics of race relations in this country. By the advent of Black Lives Matter in 2013 and
People
things
said
like
that about
we've
the
seen
civil
race
rights movement.
race relations have decreased going on since then. We see it. We could see anecdotal evidence, and we could see the actual real evidence when people are asked of different skin colors of what they feel about other people. Now, when you talk about real world solutions, look, I'm pointing out that the real world solutions that oftentimes are employed by groups like Black Lives Matter, that they say they're
solve
for
the
Black
problems
people.
by ignoring them?
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. Is
But
I
people
said
would
that.
have said
So
the
I
same
just
thing
want to
back
hit
during the
this
civil
point real
rights
quick.
movement.
Ramblin' Rob.
No, I'm making the point. It's a twofold point. One, your solutions aren't working, and second, here's what my solutions would be.
Wait, which of
so
the
city
solutions
council
that I just stated
Listen,
doesn't work? The
she
ones that
gets
I
so
said
for example,
plenty of
Black
attention.
Lives Matter and the idea of defunding
She
police.
spoiled his
Let's see what
shit.
the Council of
I didn't say
Minneapolis, that
defunding
defunded the
police.
police, said. The City Council of Minneapolis, Minnesota voted earlier this year to defund the police department, and in July, Council took its effort to reimagine public safety, additional towards dismantling the police department. Further, one of these additional
didn't
actions was
say
to remove
defund
$1
the
million
police.
for MPD. Unsurprisingly, the Minneapolis Police Department crime data reflects a rise in assaults, robberies, and homicides, as well as property crimes and arson. It also reflects more people have been murdered for the first 9 months of 2020
Crime
than
also
all
went up during
2019.
the civil
Now
rights
Minneapolis city government shocked to discover after it vilified, maligned, and defunded its police, meaning police are not outperforming their routine duties. Crime has risen.
That's a good
Council
question.
President
Like,
Lisa
you
Bender
mean
said
just
in
like a
June that her
picture of
constituents'
one?
fear of dismantling police department comes
Or
from
like,
police
can I
privilege.
sit
Got
here and
that?
hold one?
Now
I'm
they're
not
saying
sure.
they're
mentioned
refunding.
defunding the
Right.
police.
The
Also,
point
your
is-
argument here
the
would
point-
apply to the
so
civil
real
rights
quick,
movement.
I'll finish this section real quick. The point is, oftentimes people that claim to be on the left and push more radical left-wing policies actually cause harm. Now, the second thing, when we could look at actual not focusing on race and just rising tide lifting all ships and conservatism and things like that, we could see under Donald Trump, employment and economic numbers in the African-American community and other minority communities were doing quite well before COVID. So the idea that it's only the left that is offering solutions is just nonsense. And the point is this, I'm not saying, and I'll finish real quick here, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for the left. I'm saying the question asked here is, do we need to shift more to the left? Right now, the status quo is radically to the left, and there is no evidence that's been provided that shifting further
That,
to the
in
left
terms
would
of
be
optics,
beneficial.
maybe,
All of
but
the
in
things
terms
that
of
you said,
policy,
I don't
no,
really
it's
like
not.
this when you were saying about Rob and D'Angelo and all these things. Do you think those things are more likely or less likely to occur if we shift even further to the left?
Okay. That's the thing. I think they're relatively trivial, but shifting your way would lead to the perpetuation of actual harm. Not like being inconvenienced by shitty workplace mandatory training courses, but actual harm. Your solution to race relations is to ignore it. Where would you have been in the 1960s? Crime rose back then too.
It was
Absolutely,
different.
it did. There were
Civil rights
riots,
movement was
there were
different.
Can I ask Rob one question?
Wait, hold on.
Really
You
quick.
wait, stop. Wait, Demon, stop. No, you say it's different now because you're around now. Back
No, that's
then, you
objectively
would have
true.
no, hold on. Back then, you would have said it then. because the logic is the same. We don't need to talk about these problems. All we're doing by talking about them is exacerbating the issue. Crime is going up. There is more racial tension between white and black people. The civil rights movement is only leading to more hatred. We just need to chill out and not address it. That was word for word the line used by people back then, and everybody now thinks they wouldn't have been back
Bubble
in
gun.
support of second-class
You do
citizenship
that.
for black people back then. But the fact of the matter was that a lot of white people were in favor of second-class citizenship back then, and they used your arguments verbatim. And you didn't address any of the actual points I made. I didn't mention
I could make the
defunding
exact
police.
argument. So, for example,
Can I
many of
ask
the
one
causes
question
on
of
the
Rob
left
now?
are
Okay,
I've been trying to
one
get in
second.
here forever.
Okay,
I've said enough,
okay,
so
give me a second.
yeah.
I'll let Rob respond, and then Demon can ask their question.
Right. This is a misnomer because when saying that because the objective reality now is different than it was in the civil rights movement, because I say that we shouldn't have the exact same prescription. And in fact, the less we focus on race, the better it would be. I'm not saying never talk about issues when they deserve to be talked about, but clearly we've gone too far and we make everything about race now, which is causing a substantial amount of the problems we see. If Vosh says, well, if I say that now, I would have said that then, well, we see members of the left, including examples that I just gave, that are advocating for segregated spaces and safe spaces for minorities. So that means Vosh, if he endorses that, would have endorsed segregation back in the days of Jim Crow and in the Democrat-controlled KKK. Of course he wouldn't have, but I could easily say that. I could easily say that, right? If you support segregation today, you would have back then, correct?
That if you're in favor of safe spaces, you would have been in favor of an apartheid state. I feel like that's a little bit of a reach. Your argument was analogous. It was a one-to-one argument. It was the same. The argument for safe spaces is sometimes there's a supply cabinet in the back of the room, in the fourth academic building on the left, where maybe people can just like chill out and not argue. That's a safe space. The idea that safe spaces contribute to the same social harm as like segregation did is ridiculous.
It's not just safe spaces, it's actual segregation. For example, we see universities that are having segregated classes. We see universities that are having segregated graduations. We see federal agencies that are doing segregation. We see, right, all of this stuff's occurring. So if you're for that now, you would have been for segregation and white spaces and black spaces in the past.
I'm not for that.
Okay, but many on the left are. So why would we shift further to the left?
Some people are. Usually this is the same problem as the megacorps that do the woke virtue signaling thing. Academics and university professors feel like they need to kowtow to a very vocal minority, and as such, they engage in these practices. As far as I can tell, in academia, what you're talking about right now, these segregated graduations classes, are extraordinarily rare, and they're usually like one-off or two-off things that are thrown out there because one action committee was especially annoying that previous semester to the dean. I don't think this is anywhere near comparable to a broader argument in favor of segregation. And to those people, by the way,
great
those people
argument.
fucking hate me. The type of leftists
Much
who
more
engage in that
important.
behavior despise me with every fiber of their being, more so than they ever would you. Trust me. So I'm not in favor of that. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that ignoring the massive race relation disparity in this country is going to fix the problem. I think we need to tackle it head on, you know?
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Dean Mama to ask the question, then we're probably going to
I've talked so much. I am done now forever, I promise, for this thing.
I just had one quick question for Rob. Do you think BLM is a terrorist movement?
I think that some of the people that have operated in control of BLM and acted under the guise of BLM have acted in terrorist ways, but certainly there could be people in BLM that aren't terrorists.
Because that's really different than what you've said basically every time you've been on here. And I can't help but wonder if that's because you've got more eyes on you this time. In fact, it was literally just, what, a couple of days ago, I think it was, that you claimed that BLM was a terrorist organization. It's interesting. I guess you're losing that.
If you were at a BLM rally and they're advocating for destruction of property, that is terrorism by the definition of it.
Yeah, but I asked you
look up the definition of terrorism, it is using violence or intimidation to achieve political goals. That is exactly what some people in BLM do. Yes.
In fact,
and I said, we talked, for example,
there is no such thing as some people in BLM, you fucking idiot.
Namaste. Okay. So the question was, and I know, John, I'll throw it over to you because, John, you haven't got a lot to talk to this topic afterwards. But Demon Mama asked Rob if he believes that BLM is a terrorist organization. And Rob, you then responded, well, certain people at these events have acted in a terroristic fashion by destruction of property, which by the Google-like definition of it is terrorism, right?
Correct.
Okay. So did you answer the question?
Well, I was just going to say, when we had this discussion just Wednesday, I'm not shocked you forgot, 6% of the events of Black Lives Matter resulted in this sort of violence. If that was any other organization, we would say that they're a terrorist organization or have a serious problem with terrorism within their organization.
What you're saying is you think it is.
wait, can I ask you a question then?
Yeah.
Me personally, actually. I'm not supposed to do it, but can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So then if I was to like point to the Proud Boys then and say a certain amount of interactions they've had on the ground seems to a high level of it seem to be violent, then they're a terrorist organization. Or we could look at the Capitol riots and say, well, that Trump spoke there. There was a lot of Trump figures. That seemed like a Trump rally. Would the Trump organization then be a terrorist organization? Are we kind of playing loose here with definitions?
So the Proud Boys would be different because I think that I don't know the figures, but I would say a reasonable percentage of interactions that they've had at rallies probably resulted in violence. So you would have a better argument. We were told not just by people like Demon Mama, but people that in positions of power in this country, including people in the Biden administration, media, etc., that there was a terrorist organization and white supremacist insurrection that occurred January 6th. If you look at the amount of Trump rallies that resulted in riots, you could point to one. If you look at the amount of Black Lives Matter rallies that resulted in violence, you could point to hundreds upon hundreds.
That
upon
is
hundreds
so
in connection
not
with
the
Antifa.
same
No,
thing.
it is definitely analogous. What it is I'm willing to call
It is
out all
absolutely
political violence. But when you see an
disanalogous what he's
organization
saying
over
right
and over
now.
and over,
This is
223
another
by the
example
Princeton study,
where he's a
locations of
fucking
violence that occurred
lunatic.
during Black
This
Lives
is
Matter.
such a
That's more
shitty
than you
analogy.
state.
When you say organization, do you mean the ILC endorsed violence or people, members of the ILC, or do you mean like the movement umbrella term broadly? Because you said the organization.
movement umbrella.
I don't know what you mean. Okay, so we get movement instead of like organization, right?
What about the civil rights protesters? Would they have been terrorists? Well,
No,
Martin
and
Luther King.
and again, this is the argument that's constantly used by people that want to excuse violence on the left. They constantly compare it to the civil rights or the Boston Tea Party. No,
Civil
political
rights movement
violence
led to a
isn't
lot of
justified.
riots.
Political violence is not justified. In the one and every one time that it's been justified in history, there's been 10,000 times that it wasn't justified.
I
And
gotta
this is
disagree with
again,
that
but
one,
I'm not.
though.
I'll just say this real
Wait,
quick.
with
The fact
civil
that
rights
Vosh, so what Vosh is saying, if you were for violence in the past, then you're for violence now, correct,
I'm
Vosh?
just asking if your argument would lead to them being called terrorists, because the civil rights movement did lead to a lot of riots, and there were groups within the civil rights protests that actively organized stuff that you just impugned Black Lives Matter for, flipping cars, breaking windows, and the like. Would you have called them a terrorist group?
If I was there at the time, I don't know what I would have called them. What I would call them now is no, because that was one of the few times in history where something like that was justified. But even some of them
Is
would have been
terrorism no
political
longer
terrorism.
terrorism if it becomes justified, like post hoc?
Right. So if you're a slave and you use violence or intimidation to
All
not
right.
become a slave, then no, that's not terrorism. If you do so and again, this is the justification that you constantly see from the left that's advocating for political violence today. Remember this, at the end of this, the only people that have condemned political violence from all sides are people like me, people like Demon Mama, and I'm asking you, Vosh, do you think some of the political violence we saw from Black Lives Matter was justified?
I don't have a problem with political violence. You support the police, don't you?
There you go. There you go.
Well, do you
so
support
there
the
you have
police?
it. The police, giving the monopoly of use of force to the police is one of the best decisions that we've ever made as a society. The government should
All right.
have the
I
monopoly.
think I'm
on
going to
use
call
of
the
force when it
stream
comes
here
to
because it's getting
enforcing
late. And this debate has sort of devolved to the point where it's not that productive anymore. These comparisons that are being made are just stupid, and I don't think this is particularly valuable discourse anymore. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. But I do appreciate you hanging out. I can tell you that much. And I know Margot does too. I am definitely going to be on tomorrow, probably earlier in the day than I usually am during the week, obviously, because it's the weekend. So I think I'll be playing some games. I might pick the rest of this up if I don't know if it sparks me, but I think we'll probably just play games tomorrow and maybe discuss or just maybe do regular just chatting without a debate playing. I'm not sure, but that's that. And I will say I appreciate you hanging out, KK. Been fun talking to you. You're very entertaining, by the way. Your commentary is much appreciated. So yeah, I don't know what you have going on tomorrow, but if you're around, I would love to have you back. And with that said, I'm going to sign off.